I was on a guard post, a little guard post on 14th and C Street, Bureau of Engraving and Printing, Washington, D.C. It was an average day. Sun was shining, I remember that. And I think it was post BM6. They had different numerals for different sentinel posts. Armed with a shotgun and of course they made money there. They manufactured money. And they had 38 caliber revolver and a 12 gauge shotgun. And it sat out near the sidewalks so that they call it perimeters, so that if anything broke out and whatnot, anybody tried to rob the place and all like that, we're supposed to shoot down that fence line or whatnot if it came down to it. Something like a prison thing, like where you have the turrets sitting up. Anyhow, but the tourists had access to it where they can walk up and ask you questions and whatnot, because it was a perimeter thing. And so I had just entered the little house there in the little shed and taken over from another guard to relieve him. And somebody knocked on the door, and I looked out the glass, and I saw it was an elderly white man. And so I opened it, and I said, yes, what can I do for you? And he said, President shot in Dallas. And so he looked kind of wild, his eyes was kind of bugged and whatnot. So I said, oh, okay, So he walked on down the sidewalk. I just closed the door and went on back to doing what I was doing, because people, sometimes people just drift by and just say anything, And I didn't much pay much attention to it, because I'd even forgotten that the president was in Dallas and whatnot, and and I really didn't catch all of what he had said. But in retrospect, I remembered later on. In fact, within about the next hour, because then somebody came there to relieve me, and so when I went into the lobby of the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and so everybody was leaving the building, and then I noticed when I'd been walking down the sidewalk, I noticed people. I passed two ladies who one of them was crying, and then was a couple of tourists sitting down on the curb in front of the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. And they were just sitting there with their heads in their hands and all like that. Now, I didn't notice it too much. It was just at a glance. A couple of ladies coming up the sidewalk, and they were crying. So when I went into the building, it was a total pandemonium. They were emptying the place. They were telling everybody out, everybody out, everybody has to leave. They're closing down the building. So then when I went into the office, then they said, hey, the president is shot and they think he's going to die. And I said, what? Said, yeah, President Kennedy. I said, what do you mean, shot? He said, in Dallas, somebody shot him. And then they had the television on and all like that. And then that's how I found out. That's what I was doing that day. That's exactly where I was, on post BM6, Bureau of Engraving and Printing, Washington, D.C. That was stunning. Since then, including 9/11 and all like that, there's nothing in my lifetime, including Pearl Harbor, that seemed to traumatize the average person on the street more than the Kennedy assassination. People were absolutely in a state of total shock. Everything came to a standstill. Now, I was around when Pearl Harbor. I knew where I was when Pearl Harbor was bombed. I was 12 years old. I was sitting in my father's restaurant reading the funny papers. There right near the cash register. And there was a little crackly radio sitting up on a shelf. And it said, Pearl Harbor has been bombed. And I remember 2 or 3 people sitting in the restaurant, and one of them asked, Pearl Harbor? Where's Pearl Harbor? And, because nobody knew, It's somewhere overseas somewhere, Somebody answered, wouldn't it? Say, the Japanese? And they say, you mean Hitler, don't you? I say, no, Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And so I didn't know. I'm 12 years old, so I'm asking and listening and whatnot. And they say, well, we had war with Japan. And I asked people, what did that mean? They say, hey, we're in war. The war has started. We're in a big war. In other words, they're now tapping into World War II. Already, all I'd heard about was World War I. Now we're in World War II. That's what people were talking about. And I was 12 years old, and I was in Muskogee, Oklahoma then. I was in Washington, D.C. when Kennedy was assassinated. And, of course, I was in Washington, D.C. when the Twin Towers were hit and when the Pentagon was hit. In fact, I heard that explosion. I heard the explosion when the Pentagon was hit, but I didn't recognize what it was.
What do you think it was about the Kennedy assassination that traumatized so many people?
Nobody expected it. That's the main thing. Nobody expected that. Completely unexpected. See, since then, almost anything is expected now. By the time they got around to Hinckley taking those shots at Reagan, people were almost ho-hum about it, Oh, well, shooting at presidents is a routine thing, President Ford had been shot at a couple of times. Now, years before then, Harry Truman, somebody tried to storm the Blair House right across from the White House, which is where he was staying at the time. But they didn't get nowhere. They gunned them down before they even got near the, they got him. One of them got as far as the steps of the building. There was about 3 of them. But most people had forgotten that. And most people have forgotten Garfield being assassinated. And most people considered Abraham Lincoln. That was so far back, ancient history. But the Kennedy thing, nobody expected that. Nobody was prepared for it. And everybody was walking around in a state of shock. It closed down the government and everything. Everything came to a standstill. You pass people on the street, everybody just walking around in a state of shock. People crying, sitting on the curb crying. Because they considered Kennedy as Camelot, almost like a king, royal family. A lot of black people regretted it because he's one of the first presidents in recent history that said threw a few words out. It's kind of commonplace now, but at the time it was kind of bold for Kennedy to be saying things that he was saying because everything was hot, really, in the early 1960s. 1960s, everything was turbulent. There was riots everywhere, lynchings and whatnot, all during the 1960s, late 1950s. But mostly riots, demonstrations, and during that whole decade. real volatile. Dangerous traveling in the South for black people.
I guess when it happened, did you? What were your thoughts about it? Did you connect it to white supremacy, or what were you?
Oh, sure. I wrote a letter to the Washington Post. That's the only time I did write a letter to the editor. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did you say?
Oh, I said that the people would eventually get over the president's assassination. I said, but the one thing that will be long-lasting is the hatred of Negroes. I remember saying that in the letter. Right. I said, after everything settles down, that'll be the one thing that will be constant.
Wow.
Yeah, I fired off that letter immediately. It's probably in the Washington Post archive somewhere.
Katherine, Massey, Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Friday, March 21, 2025. So I have been told. The Katherine Massey Book Club, hopefully sharing information for non-white people victims of white supremacy. New book, our debut study session on Abraham Bolden's The Echo from Dealey Plaza, the true story of the first African American on the White House Secret Service detail and his quest for justice after the assassination of JFK. We heard Neely Fuller Jr. at the beginning, Grandcester, detailing his recollection. What was he doing at the time of the JFK assassination? And just for emphasis, to have someone who lived through Pearl Harbor, World War II, the election of President Obama, the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., 9/11, and was in Washington, D.C. for the bombing of the Pentagon, and he said pretty emphatically, without heeing and hawing and hemmering, thinking about it, most traumatic event of my lifetime, the assassination of JFK, November 22, 1963, easily. Now that is stunning. At minimum, something to think about as we proceed, and I've heard similar commentary from many other people who lived through the Kennedy assassination. Just, wow, they killed the white president in broad daylight. Incidentally, the music that's playing in the background, I have used this music over the years for a number of reasons, but this music is specifically from Oliver Stone's film, JFK, not a documentary, about the assassination, and he specifically says that he has this drum cadence playing in the background when the film opens and Kennedy is assassinated because it is a military cadence, and he wants to imply that this assassination had military connections. You do not have random people who come out and do this sort of excellent snipership, marksmanship, and have these folks just, stumble out of bed in the morning. Just remember, we did read Nixon's Piano, where we had the author, Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly, as a guest on the program. Way back in 2010, he talked about all of the presidents, including Kennedy, support the system of white supremacy, racism, and we talked about Kennedy specifically. With that, we will get to it. Trump released all those records this week, so I thought it would be correct to read about JFK at this moment. Pretty black girl told me about this book way back when. We will get to it. Abraham Bolden's The Echo from Dealey Plaza, Katherine Massey Book Club, audio segment 1.
The Echo from Dealey Plaza. The true story of the first African American on the White House Secret Service detail and his quest for justice after the assassination of JFK. By Abraham Bolden. Narrated by Bill Andrew Quinn. Introduction. The impact of John F. Kennedy's assassination radiated out in all directions, like the ripples from a stone dropped into water. The event had such force that we still feel it today, nearly 45 years later. The echo from Dealey Plaza reverberated around the world and altered the course of American life. It also affected countless individual lives, one of them mine. I knew John Kennedy. I shook his hand and looked into his eyes, and I served, for a brief but crucial time, at his side. I sensed in my heart, as many people did, that he understood the troubles of the common man and shared the pain of all downtrodden and oppressed people. He labored to make the promises of a better country a reality for all Americans. Born into great wealth and privilege, he did this not for any personal gain, but simply because he knew it was the right thing to do. He wanted to do his best to foster equality of opportunity for all the citizens under his charge, and even those beyond our borders. John F. Kennedy entrusted me with his life, making me the first African American to serve on the Secret Service White House detail. No one can ever take that honor away from me. I can't say for certain who fired the fatal shots on that day, November 22, 1963. The government rendered its official opinion, and legions of authors and researchers have offered theirs, but we are likely to debate the whys and wherefores of this event for a long time to come. What I do know is that the president died because of a failure of the security around him, a situation that some of us saw coming. I wasn't there that day, but I saw what went on among the agents who were pledged to protect him to the very best of their ability. I was one of those agents. This is my story, the story of my journey from a small town in southern Illinois to the door of the Oval Office, and then to the depths of personal crisis in the aftermath of that service. Although I have changed some names to protect the identity of certain people, the story is true, and speaks to us today about the state of the society that we asked John Kennedy to lead, and the kind of country he left behind. Chapter 1. I entered the Secret Service in 1960, after a number of years in law enforcement, first for the Pinkerton Detective Agency and then as an officer in the Illinois State Police. It was as a state trooper that I first encountered the special agent in charge of the Springfield, Illinois office, Fred Backstrom of the United States Secret Service. Massachusetts Senator John Kennedy was on his way to Peoria for a presidential campaign stop, and I had been assigned to escort SAIC Backstrom around the city for security preparations. As we rode along one of the intended motorcade routes, I turned to Agent Backstrom. "Are there any Negroes in the Secret Service now?" I asked. Backstrom and I had worked together before and were on friendly terms. "I don't think so, Abraham, but I'm not sure. I heard that there may be one in New York or New Jersey, but I've never met him," he replied. "I can tell you this. We are looking for new agents, and if you're interested, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't apply. I can send you an application in the mail, and the Civil Service Administration will guide you along the way." We went back to our duties, but a few weeks later I received the application, just as Agent Backstrom had promised. In the early fall of 1960, I drove down to Springfield, where I was escorted from Secret Service headquarters to take the Civil Service test. I learned several weeks later that I had just missed passing the test, but the next time SAIC Backstrom came through Peoria, about a month before Kennedy was to visit, he stopped by my house. Backstrom suggested that I could enter the Secret Service under a Schedule A appointment, meaning that my previous experience would qualify me to become a probationary agent. The probation period would end after completion of 2 years of satisfactory service. Agent Backstrom was very encouraging, as was my wife Barbara, and so I left the Illinois State Police and joined the United States Secret Service. I first saw John Kennedy when he came through Peoria on a campaign swing in October 1960. I was assigned to traffic control and caught a glimpse of the young senator sitting perched atop the back seat of a big white Lincoln convertible as his motorcade came in from the airport. I watched Kennedy hop down from the car about 50 feet away from me to shake hands with locals crowded along the side of the road. Agents from the convertible directly behind fanned out to protect him as he waded into the excited crowd. By the following spring, I myself had been through training at the Department of the Treasury, under which the Secret Service resides. President Kennedy was now scheduled to visit Chicago on April 28th for a thank-you dinner with Mayor Richard Dealey at McCormick Place. Dealey's political machine had helped deliver a victory to Kennedy through means not everyone considered legitimate. An advanced detail of Secret Service agents worked with the local office to plan security and assigned the Chicago field agents to various protective duties and positions. While some agents got the coveted spots inside the McCormick Place banquet room near the president, my assignment was to guard a basement restroom that had been set aside for Kennedy's exclusive use while he was there. I searched the bathroom and the surrounding area, and when I was satisfied that it was secure, I quietly took up my post. At about 8:30 p.m., a half hour after the event was scheduled to begin, I heard a sudden commotion at the top of the stairs near the restroom. It seemed a group of people was heading downstairs, trailed by the sounds of a cheering crowd and the flashing of cameras. Before I knew it, John F. Kennedy was striding toward the restroom, surrounded by an impressive entourage, including Mayor Dealey, Governor Otto Kerner, Senator Paul Douglas, Congressman William Dawson, and a handful of prominent local politicians. As he got to the door, the president surprised me by stopping directly in front of me and looking me in the eye with a slight smile, creasing his lips. "Are you a Secret Service agent or one of Mayor Dealey's finest?" he asked, causing the mayor to chuckle lightly. Collecting myself, I replied, "I'm a Secret Service agent, Mr. President." "He's assigned to the Chicago office," a more senior agent offered. "His name is Abraham Bolden." Kennedy nodded slightly in acknowledgement and continued on in his crisp Boston accent. "Has there ever been a Negro agent on the Secret Service White House detail, Mr. Bolden?" "Not to my knowledge, Mr. President." "Would you like to be the first?" Kennedy asked, his eyes twinkling under the bright hotel lights. I didn't try to hide my enthusiasm. Smiling broadly and nodding, I answered, "Yes, sir, Mr. President." After a short while, my attention was diverted back to the entrance of the restroom as President Kennedy walked out of the washroom in a hurried pace. Led by 2 Secret Service agents, President Kennedy and the other members of the group climbed the steps leading up to the main floor amid the blinding flashes of light from the photographer's cameras, turned left in the direction of the banquet room, and disappeared from my view. The band played the presidential fanfare. I heard the thunderous applause that filled the corridors of McCormick Place as President Kennedy entered the banquet hall. 6 years later, I stood desperate with fear in the dimly lit corridor of a prison psychiatric ward. Kennedy was dead, felled by an assassin's bullet, and the glory of that electric moment in Chicago barely survived in my memory. I waited for the guard to walk me to one of the barren cells and listened to the soft moans, unintelligible babble, senseless ravings, and occasional harrowing screams of the unfortunate souls consigned to that terrible place. I was about to become one of them. Chapter 2. When I look back at my childhood, I am able to make eerie connections to the troubles of my adult life, shadows that hinted at the darkness that was to come. I am also lucky enough to be able to see the foundations of my character being put into place, and I am filled with pride and gratitude toward my parents for the ways in which they prepared me. A record snowfall fell on East St. Louis, Illinois on January 19, 1935, preventing my mother from going to the hospital when she went into labor. When I came into the world late that night, it was through the ministrations of the neighborhood midwife who lived down the street. The blanket of white snow would have added an unreal air of cleanliness and tranquility to the rows of wood-framed shanties along the unpaved streets and the cornfields lying just beyond. When the snow melted, the mud in the streets would suck the shoes right off your feet. Making it to the outhouse was an ordeal in such weather in the years before my dad dug the trenches and laid the dull maroon clay pipe that brought us indoor plumbing. While the circumstances of my birth might seem extraordinary from the vantage point of the 21st century, they weren't particularly so for my mother, a stout, resourceful woman with light brown skin. She kept house for my father and their 6 children, including me, sewing our clothes and quilts and linens on an old Singer pedal sewing machine, and putting up canned fruit and preserves to sustain us. My mother ran a tight ship, maintaining a strict schedule of household chores for all the children and generally making sure that her brood stuck to the straight and narrow. I can't imagine a woman more ideally suited to go through life with my father, a strong, stern man of quiet intelligence who seemed unable to ever stop working. When I was a boy, my father would ride a bicycle between 2 full-time jobs at the B&O Railroad during the day and the Swift Packing Company at night. Even in those precious hours at home, Dad was always building or improving something. We became used to the sound of hammering and sawing and to the sight of Dad digging up the ground to lay pipe, pulling wire, or mixing cement. I think my father found something therapeutic and soothing about the hard physical labor, and he saw to it that each of his children learned something about these manual trades, not only for the focus and discipline they required, but also so that we would have those skills someday if times got hard. My parents were quite a team. We children grew up knowing that our father wouldn't tolerate any of us straying even slightly from his strict code of proper behavior. There was to be no disobedience, lying, fighting, cursing, gambling, smoking, drinking, or hanging out with unsavory characters. We also knew that he wouldn't hesitate to enforce his code with a few strokes of his belt. Most of the time, just the thought of being punished by Dad was enough to keep us in line, and he was able to leave the day-to-day management of the family to my mother. In contrast to her no-nonsense, laconic husband, my mother's jocular, fun-loving personality kept the home in high spirits. We kids knew that if we were in trouble, we could go to Mom to help smooth the way with Dad if necessary. My father used to say, "Your family comes first," and he lived by that principle every day of his life. When there wasn't quite enough food to go around, he'd sit quietly by himself in the living room while the children ate. He wore his only suit, gray and threadbare, for years and years, all the while making sure that no expense was spared on books for school, educational outings such as our annual trip across the Mississippi River to the Forest Park Zoo in St. Louis, or on the finest musical instruments, which he insisted that all of us learn. I myself had chosen the trumpet, and though our cupboard was skimpy, my father found a way to bring home the best trumpet he could get his hands on. I got to be pretty good, eventually earning the nickname Little Satch for my fondness of Dixieland jazz and winning music scholarships to Millikan and Lincoln universities. As a teenager, I played with a touring group and occasionally on the radio. As it happens, music was the spark for another brush with greatness. Before I was old enough for the high school band, I used to sneak into their practices to watch my older brother and listen to the music. Whenever Mr. Elwood C. Buchanan, the band director, would stop the music to talk something over, there would always be the lingering sound of a lone trumpet in the back of the room, playing jazzy riffs on the march they'd been rehearsing. It was coming from a skinny, very dark-skinned boy who always looked as if he were transported to another world when he played. I asked my brother who he was. "Oh, that's Miles Davis," he said. "Dr. Davis's son. He has a brother in the band who plays sax." It was important to show equal respect to any adults we might encounter, not only our parents, as I learned the hard way one evening. I was 14, a boy, but starting to think of myself as a young man. Adding to my pride that day was a new pair of hobnailed boots on my feet, which in those days was like sporting a pair of the latest Nike basketball shoes. A bunch of my friends, including Floyd, Moses, Spook Eye, and Aaron and I were playing ball out on the street in front of Brother Albert's candy store. I let one get by me, and the ball bounced onto my porch, striking one of the wooden window frames just below the glass. Brother Albert came limping out of his store and snapped at me. "Little Bolden, move on down the street from in front of my store before you break one of the windows." He don't own this street, I thought, and I'm not moving anywhere. Of course, it wasn't long before another throw sailed over my head and hit one of the windows with a loud bang. Brother Albert shot out of the store as fast as his lame legs allowed. "I told you boys to move on down the street a little bit. All of you know better than to play hardball in front of my store." He shook a finger at me. "Now move on like I said." I turned to Brother Albert and sneered. "You kiss my ass." Brother Albert stood seething for a moment, but didn't say anything. A minute later, he closed up his store and marched down the street in the direction of my house. At this point, I was determined to stand my ground, even as Spook Eye and Moses urged me to move down the street. Even after Brother Albert returned to his store, followed by my sister Cecilia telling me that "Daddy wants to see you," I stayed where I was, tossing my ball in the air and catching it in my glove. When Cecilia came back a second time, I slowly made my way home, dragging the toes of my boots across the street. As soon as I walked in the door, my dad's big black hand took me by the strap of my bib overalls and yanked me right out of my boots. In a flash, he was laying his belt hard against my backside. He kept at it even after my mother cried out, "Don't kill the boy, Daniel." "I'm not going to kill him, Ophelia." Dad spoke calmly, even though he was breathing hard and sweating with the effort of the whipping. "I just wanted to kiss his ass for Brother Albert." It was the last time I played ball in front of Brother Albert's store, and I've never spoken that way to anyone since. There was nothing fanatical about my parents' faith. The church was an important part of our lives, and years later, I would rely on my faith to carry me through moments of despair. Mom took the lead in our religious education, shepherding us to the raucous and emotional services every Sunday at St. Paul Baptist Church, teaching us to read the Bible and holding spontaneous Bible sessions around the house. She helped me deal with my own youthful doubts about God. I recall confronting her one day. "Mom," I said sorrowfully, "I hear the preaching and the singing and the people shouting and crying around the church, but nothing is coming of it. Things are not getting any better for our people. If God loves everybody, why is there so much misery and unhappiness all around us? It's as if God doesn't care about us." Mom believed that the people in church were all doing their best to do the Lord's work and be good Christians, and she told me so. She comforted me with something I must have heard her say 1,000 times. "God will make a way somehow." But I suppose my mother's answer never fully satisfied me, and I began to search the scriptures myself. I needed somehow to reconcile the obvious deprivation that permeated our little world with the great and beneficent God I heard about from my parents and preachers. I had found a beaten-up paperback copy of the New Testament in a trash pile near the vacant lot where my friends and I played ball, and began to study it methodically. Every morning before school, I'd get up early and read several chapters on my mother's favorite rocking chair behind our black pot-bellied stove. I'd pick out one verse to memorize, and all day during school I would repeat it to myself until it became a part of me. My parents dictated the presence of religion in our lives, but I didn't see it as onerous. I took to it naturally, willingly, and later even contemplated attending the seminary. Perhaps I was predisposed to a more spiritual perspective on life. Even as a child, I accepted the notion that there was more to the world than what I could see or hold in my hand. I sensed other, unseen spheres of parallel existence, shadowy entities that I felt present in times of illness or danger. I didn't fully understand these specters, and feared them, even as they amused and sometimes comforted me. I knew these presences, though undefined, were to be taken seriously. Throughout my life, I have been visited by dreams and have experienced what some people would call visions, which have figured prominently in my consciousness. One dream from my youth, perhaps when I was about 13, has haunted my life. I was imprisoned, lying face up in a rectangular steel enclosure with a glass window at eye level. The enclosure was resting in the center of a large bare room with no doors. Outside the window, I could barely make out 4 figures that seemed to be a woman and 3 small children. I tried to call out to them, but they did not answer. I woke up sweating and terrified, alone in the darkness. The next morning I told my mother about the dream. When she asked what I thought it had meant, I told her, "I'll be dead before I'm 30. "Don't say that, son," Mom responded calmly. "No one knows when that time will come but the Lord." And yet I was never able to shake that dream, even when I told my wife about it many years later. In 1962, when our 3rd child was born, the sense that the time was drawing near was with me all the time. I was 29. Not long after, I had my first experience with an unexplainable phenomenon. I was playing ball in the sandlot about 4 blocks from my house, as I often did, when suddenly I heard a voice calling my name. I looked around, but saw no one. When I heard the voice again, it was clearly my mother's voice, calling for me. I bolted for home, stopping long enough to explain where I was going. "Aw, come on, man," my friend said. "You can't hear your mother from here." And yet I kept on going as fast as I could. When I got to the house, I found my mother sitting in an armchair on the back porch, sobbing softly. In one hand she held my dad's old pliers. Her other hand was dripping blood onto a pile of old newspapers. I came closer and saw a fat sliver of porcelain wedged underneath one of her fingernails. I took the pliers and yanked the shard out before she could even protest, and was rewarded by a chorus of, "Thank you, Jesus!" I don't know how it was that my mother was able to make her need known to me, but I do know how good it felt to have been there for her. As I grew into manhood, my life didn't take me too far from home. I attended Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri, graduating near the top of my class, and married a local girl. While on semester break in my hometown after driving my mother to church one Sunday, my eye was drawn to a beautiful young woman walking down the street with her mother. I recognized her as someone I knew, but couldn't imagine that this lovely young lady was Barbara, the little girl with skinny legs I remembered skipping rope in front of the local movie theater. I was smitten, and wasted little time courting her. We married very soon thereafter, and set about starting our family. Not a day has gone by when I haven't felt grateful for the good fortune that put Barbara in my life. At first, I capitalized on my musical ability to find work, teaching lessons part-time at a local accordion school. I even had the chance at a full-time job as a high school music teacher, but I'd already begun to feel that this was not my calling. My introduction to law enforcement was through a classified ad that Barbara spotted in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency was looking for investigators. I decided to apply, which led to an experience that was to presage many later episodes in my professional career. I went to the St. Louis office of the Pinkerton Agency on a cold Monday in January 1957. One of the 2 women at the front desk asked how she could help me. I told her I had come about the ad for investigators in the newspaper. Barbara had wisely counseled me to take the ad with me, in case there was some confusion, and I held it out to the receptionist. She turned to her colleague and said, "He's looking for a job application." The other woman, a small blonde who had been pecking away at her typewriter, looked at the ad, then looked at me, then shook her head. "I don't think they're hiring." I protested, holding the newspaper ad from just the day before. "The ad says that Pinkerton is looking for detective investigators, and it gives this address at the bottom of the ad." "Well, as far as I know, they're not hiring people like you." I didn't feel like letting that slide. "But the ad doesn't specify a white investigator or a Negro investigator," I said coldly. I turned on my heel and had one hand on the exit door when I heard a man's voice. "What seems to be the problem out here?" A tall, well-dressed, middle-aged man had come out from the main office and was taking in the scene. The woman explained how I had come in looking for a job and how she was handling the situation, but he stopped her short. "Give him an application, and when he finishes filling it out, show him into my office." I was interviewed on the spot and learned that while the Pinkerton agency employed some black uniformed guards, none was working as a detective. They seemed to be impressed by my college record and by my pledge to work hard so that they would never regret the decision to hire me. A week or so later, I was hired as a Pinkerton detective, the beginning of my life in police work. A year later, I joined the Illinois State Highway Police, stationed in Peoria, and eventually moved out of traffic control, becoming one of the first members of the Illinois Criminal Investigation Division when it was formed. There, my knowledge of police work deepened. Many of the investigations in which I participated had to do with gambling and helped prepare me for my work later with the Secret Service. By the time I made it into the Secret Service at the end of October 1960, I not only had a fair amount of law enforcement experience under my belt, but also had learned a thing or two about breaking down color barriers. It seemed that each job brought with it the opportunity to become a racial pioneer. At Pinkerton, I had been the first black detective, and as a state police officer, I'd had the prestige of becoming the first black patrolman assigned to work District 8 in Peoria. There wasn't much I hadn't seen or heard. I knew what to expect from the other agents, and I had an idea of what they'd expect of me. The Secret Service at that time was a relatively small organization, with about 300 agents, a third of whom were assigned to Washington, D.C., either as part of the White House detail or to other protective research positions. The rest of us were field agents, scattered to various offices around the country and in a handful of foreign countries. We were required to provide protection for the President and Vice President if they were in our area, but our primary day-to-day responsibility was to investigate counterfeiting, the transfer of American and foreign currency and other negotiable documents, and the forging of checks and instruments issued by the U.S. Treasury Department. I served primarily in the Chicago field office, although from time to time I went to other cities on undercover assignments to investigate counterfeiters. These were dangerous operations that required an agent to assume a false identity and act his part with great skill, lest he be unmasked and threatened. I enjoyed the work immensely, even though it took me away from my family, and found I had a talent for it, posting a 100% rate of success in those cases. Of course, the Chicago office was not free of racial issues. At first, I was assigned to work with 3 postal inspector aides in an effort to clean up a large backlog of check forgery cases in the city's densely populated black ghettos. I didn't encounter any serious problems, but within the office itself, I began to get hints of the kind of racism that seemed fairly standard in those days, especially after the agent in charge departed and was replaced by Harry Guyline. Guyline held weekly staff meetings and liked to keep things light, usually opening with some banter and jokes, some which had clear racial overtones. He would casually refer to black males as colored boys. Eventually I complained, only to be told that I needed to relax, to develop a thicker skin. My superiors seemed to feel that their making such jokes actually reflected how completely I had been accepted in the club, but I wasn't buying it, and extracted a promise that such behavior would cease immediately. That didn't stop everyone in the office from indulging in the usual antics. One agent, named J. Lloyd Stocks, had a habit of making colored boy jokes when he knew I could hear him. He liked to horse around, pantomiming the shuffling gait and slow drawl that formed the caricature of an uneducated Southern Negro. Again, I made my resentment known, and although no official action was taken, Agent Stocks did not stop his clowning. Over time, he and I developed what I thought was an amicable relationship. Chapter 3. The Secret Service made little mention of my status as the first black agent on the presidential detail, either within the service itself or to the general public. I had received my orders to come to Washington shortly after my conversation with President Kennedy in that Chicago basement. The assignment was for an initial 30-day probationary period, after which I would have the option of remaining as a permanent member of the detail or returning to my position as a field agent in the Chicago office. In fact, another agent in the Secret Service had been touted as the first Negro in that agency. That agent, however, viewed his Negro heritage with disdain, pointing out that he was a fluent Spanish speaker who was the offspring of a Hispanic mother and a mixed Negro father. I worked with him in 1963, and he wasted no time in making his feelings clear. While we were on an undercover assignment in Cleveland, Ohio, this agent punched a handcuffed black prisoner in the face. I took immediate exception to the unnecessary brutality and reminded him that the prisoner was a black brother and shouldn't be receiving that kind of treatment from his own Negro kindred. "Don't call me a Negro. I'm no Negro. I'm Puerto Rican, so don't ever call me a Negro again. Look at my hair and the color of my skin. Do I look black to you?" He added a few uncomplimentary remarks about blacks in general, comments that stuck with me a long time and tainted my association with him for the rest of my tenure with the Secret Service. In April 1961, just days before I met him, President Kennedy issued the following order: Memorandum for the heads of all executive departments and agencies. Executive Order Number 10925, promulgated March 6, 1961, reaffirms that discrimination because of race, creed, color, or national origin is contrary to the constitutional principles and policies of the United States, and that it is the policy of the executive branch of the government to encourage, by positive measures, equal opportunity for all qualified persons within the government. I want immediate and specific action taken to assure that no use is made of the name, sponsorship, facilities, or activity of any executive department or agency by or for any employee recreational organization practicing discrimination based on race, creed, color, or national origin. Current practices in each department are to be brought into immediate compliance with this policy, and a report by the head of each executive agency filed to that effect before May 1, 1961. I believed that Kennedy's commitment to racial equality was deeply felt and sincere. Suffering is a great equalizer, and I had seen something in Kennedy's eyes that made me understand that he had known suffering of his own and could empathize with people of vastly different experience. It would have been easy to see the appointment of a black agent to his personal detail as a political attention grabber, but in truth, he didn't need a stunt like that to win over African-American voters. They loved him already. If anything, the president's efforts in the area of civil rights hurt him politically more than they helped him. He alienated Southerners and conservatives around the country, most of whom were already suspicious of him. In this, the Secret Service reflected the more backward elements of America. Many of the agents with whom I worked were products of the South. Time and again I overheard them making chilling racist remarks, referring to Kennedy as that nigger lover, whose efforts to force integration in the South and enforce other civil rights initiatives were screwing up the country. I heard some members of the White House detail say that if shots were fired at the president, they'd take no action to protect him. A few agents vowed they would quit the Secret Service rather than give up their lives for Kennedy. These were, of course, volatile times for race relations in America. A month before I was to report to Washington, violence erupted in several southern cities. In May 1961, the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, staged a series of freedom rides in Alabama in an effort to integrate buses and bus terminals. One bus was burned by a mob in Anniston, Alabama. An angry segregationist crowd attacked a group of civil rights demonstrators in Montgomery, injuring several people. Several hundred U.S. Marshals, sent in by Attorney General Robert Kennedy, arrived to protect the demonstrators. National Guardsmen, with fixed bayonets, scattered a mob that had challenged them outside a black church where Martin Luther King Jr. was speaking. Elsewhere, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, would face opposition from more radical black nationalist and black power organizations. The Nation of Islam, led by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, would rise in prominence, bringing in many new recruits for a new black nation of Islam as more and more flourishing Muslim businesses challenged the status quo of white dominance in America. Images of violence and upheaval were sparked by simmering racial tension were electrifying the airwaves and print media across the country and around the world. Such was the climate when I arrived in Washington on the night of June 5, 1961. I only had a couple of hours until I was to report for duty at the White House at midnight. The guard at the gate checked my credentials with great care, and I felt his eyes on my back as I entered the building. Turning to look at him, I saw in his face the understanding that my arrival there was historic. Inside the White House, I was greeted by Stu Stout, a broad-shouldered, middle-aged agent neatly dressed in a dark suit. As Agent Stout led me through the building, past the portraits of Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and the presidential seal etched into the floor, I marveled at the elegant furnishings, the marble and polished mahogany, the sheer grandeur of the place. He sat me down in the small Secret Service office and gave me some initial instructions. The President is going to Palm Beach Thursday. We don't know exactly when, but we should be leaving before noon. When I show you around in a few minutes, you will notice that some agents are carrying small tote bags with them. They have a few extra changes of clothing in them because, on this job, you never know when the President might decide to leave the White House for a while. I would advise you to get a tote bag if you don't already have one. Put a change of shorts, a shirt or two, and a few toilet items inside. I told him that I knew where I could get one right after my shift ended, and he quickly told me that I wouldn't need it that soon. I wouldn't be going to Palm Beach, but would be assigned to the President's Glenora farm compound in Middleburg, Virginia, where the First Lady would be staying while the President was in Florida. Stu showed me around. We walked past the office of Press Secretary Pierre Salinger and his assistant Andrew Hatcher, the first black man to hold the post. Passing other Secret Service agents, we came to a highly polished dark wooden door bearing the seal of the President of the United States. Stu opened the door just wide enough for me to glimpse the President's large desk and the rocking chair that had received so much attention. Immediately past the Oval Office was the Cabinet Room, dominated by a great long mahogany table, where Stu said, "Decisions are made that affect the whole world." I saw immaculate meeting rooms, salons used for entertaining, the spotless kitchen, and the elevator that led to the first family's living quarters. We descended below ground level and walked along long, brightly lit corridors, where uniformed personnel moved around purposefully or sat in front of computer consoles and television monitors. Brightly colored maps and displays lined the walls. It seemed otherworldly. Stu paused in front of a set of heavy gray steel doors and told me that I was about to see one of the many things I would learn about that were never to be discussed outside the service. He opened the door and showed me the President's office in case of extreme emergency, a room furnished nearly identical to the President's office upstairs, but with computer-animated maps on the walls and a communications office. I spent the rest of that first night in the Secret Service office within the White House, studying the appropriate sections on protection in the agency manual and getting to know the other agents who would stop by and introduce themselves. One agent in particular, however, seemed to be keeping his distance. He never introduced himself or even acknowledged me. I said something to him as he walked by my desk for the second or third time, but he didn't respond. I hated to be guilty of the same kind of stereotyping that had been directed at me so often, but this agent just had the look of trouble about him. He was large and paunchy, with his stomach hanging over his belt, but he held himself with the bearing of a military man and the confident movements of a former athlete. When he spoke, I heard the unmistakable accent of the Deep South. I wondered if perhaps I had inadvertently sat at his desk and moved to another desk in the office, but he showed no reaction. Later, after he had left, I asked another of the agents about him. "That's Harvey Henderson," Agent Edward Tucker told me. "He takes over when Stu is off. He's been around a long time on the detail. He has a quick temper and has a problem with some people. If he gives you any trouble, just let me know. In the morning, on the way to my apartment after my first White House shift, I bought that tote bag Stu had mentioned and a pair of sunglasses. I phoned Barbara to share the excitement of my new assignment and to tell her about all that I had seen. Over the next couple of days, I familiarized myself with my duties. One of my tasks, like all the White House agents, was to stand post at various locations in and around the building. I had studied the manual carefully on this point and knew the regulations. An agent was required to be inside, if the post was one of the small enclosed guard stations, or in very close proximity to his post at all times until relieved by another agent. According to the manual, failing to secure a post of duty, leaving without permission, or drinking on a post of duty were all grounds for immediate dismissal from the Secret Service. John Kennedy had already left for Palm Beach when I arrived for work on June 9th, which I thought must have accounted for the fact that no agents were manning the 2 security posts in the White House lobby. I went straight to the Secret Service office to resume studying the manual, as I had been instructed. I found my copy, with the strip of paper I had stuck between the pages to mark my place. Inside the book, right next to my bookmark, was a surprise. It was a copy of an office memo, folded in half with a crude caricature penciled in the back. The drawing showed a man with obviously exaggerated Negroid features, a large, flat nose, wide lips stretching from ear to ear, and tight beads of hair. The face had been colored in, black except for the big white eyes and oversized lips. And the tears. The man in the picture was crying. It wasn't the overt racism that surprised me, but rather the fact that something like this had happened so soon, after only a few days in the detail, and in the White House of John Kennedy, the man who never missed a chance to demand publicly and forcefully that racism and bigotry be eliminated throughout America. This was a president who was prepared to send troops into the South to ensure justice for black people, and who had seen to it that I was brought into his personal protection detail. I had sworn an oath. I had left my wife and family halfway across the country to be in this dangerous place, prepared to sacrifice my own life for the president's, and there I sat in the stillness of the office, listening to the pounding of my heart, staring at a cartoon of a crying, buffoonish black man. The memo on the other side of the picture compounded my anger. Office Memorandum, United States Government, to SAIC-WH Detail, Airmail, date, June 6, 1961, from SAIC Marshall, Miami, 3-11-602-111, subject, Visit of the President to Palm Beach, Florida. This will confirm my long-distance telephone conversation today with ASAIC Ben relative to securing reservations at Woody's South Wind Motel, West Palm Beach, Florida. I advised that I had conferred with Mr. R. McCarthy of the above-named hotel, and he advised that he would not accept a colored agent at this motel, but that he could find housing at a first-class colored motel at Riviera Beach, Florida. ASAIC Ben was further advised that the exclusive Palm Beach Towers accommodates Assistant Press Secretary Hatcher, and that possibly the colored agent could share a room with Mr. Hatcher. As an alternative, 2 shifts could be accommodated at Woody's Motel, and, if integration is an issue here, reservations for the entire working shift employing this Negro agent could be housed together at the Negro Motel. This is a very explosive situation which may bring unfavorable publicity to the President and the service if not handled carefully. John A. Marshall, Chief 2CC, SAIC, Miami. Reading the memo left me totally deflated. It was all too clear to me that the racism that Kennedy wanted so much to stamp out in the country was alive and well in his own government, in this very service. Here was an opportunity to put Kennedy's words into action, but it was clearly not a priority of the old guard at the Secret Service, whose attitude was no better than that of the hotel manager in Palm Beach, not to mention the duly elected governors who were actively resisting integration in places such as Mississippi, Alabama, and Arkansas. I hand-copied the text of the memorandum, folded the memo, and placed it back in the book. I was going to keep cool, say nothing, and see if my lack of response might lure the prankster out into the open. Maybe he would give himself away with some more overt and direct racist comment or action. Chapter 4. A week and a half later, having moved off the midnight shift to more reasonable hours, I was standing post directly outside the President's office, where a meeting was going on. The door opened and Senators Hubert Humphrey and Barry Goldwater walked out of the Oval Office. I reached in to close the door behind them, and the President, who was talking with his brother Robert, looked up and noticed me. "Mr. Bolden, I see you made it here. How do you like Washington?" He extended his right hand to me. Stunned that the President remembered our conversation, no less my name, I stammered, "Fine, Mr. President." Kennedy smiled broadly. "How's Mayor Dealey?" "Fine, Mr. President." He motioned to Senators Goldwater and Humphrey, who were still standing outside the office, and we walked out toward them. "This is Mr. Bolden." He raised his hand in a gesture of formal introduction. "He's the first Negro to be assigned to the Secret Service White House staff." Humphrey greeted me with warmth and enthusiasm, pumping my hand and asking how I was finding Washington. Goldwater, on the other hand, made no audible greeting, nor did he try to shake my hand. I got the sense that he thought meeting me wasn't nearly as important as the conversation with Humphrey that the President had interrupted. "Have you seen my brother Bobby?" the President asked, leading me back into the Oval Office, but the Attorney General appeared to have left. Still smiling, apparently enjoying my presence there, Kennedy introduced me to a secretary, Evelyn Lincoln, and to his press secretary, Pierre Salinger, to whom he described me as the Jackie Robinson of the Secret Service. When Kennedy and Salinger began to get back to business, I returned to my post. I was relieved by another agent about 5 minutes later. I returned to the Secret Service office where Agent Henderson, in charge of the shift that day, was reading a newspaper. "We sent you a relief," Henderson drawled. "You weren't on your post. You're not supposed to leave your post for any reason." He barely looked up from his paper. "President Kennedy took me into his office," I said. My explanation seemed to further inflame Henderson. "You're not supposed to leave your post until you are relieved," he continued, his voice rising in anger. He now folded the paper and laid it on top of the desk. "President Kennedy called me into the office, and I was with him for a while," I said again, my own agitation now showing. "What am I supposed to do when President Kennedy gives me an order or asks me to do something? I can't tell the President what to do." "If something happens in your area and you're not on your post, your ass is going to be in the ringer," he warned, waving his finger at me as I walked out of the office. I stopped and turned, and Henderson and I stood for a moment staring unblinkingly at each other. I felt with sudden certainty that he had been the one who had left the cartoon and the memo in my manual. I had the fleeting thought to rush him, to have it out right then and there. Henderson tugged at the top of his pants, but made no move to sit back down or advance toward me. I knew I couldn't challenge him. It would have been a disgrace and an embarrassment to the President. More important, it would have played right into the hands of men such as Henderson, helping them make their case that blacks were unfit for such a position. Besides, Agent Henderson was the shift supervisor that day, and so he was legitimately in a position to comment on how I did my job. With the tension still simmering, I walked away. Not all the agents on the White House detail were like Henderson, for which I was thankful. Stu Stout, for example, the agent who greeted me when I first got there, represented the other side of the coin. He and I were among the agents who accompanied the President a few days later on a cruise on the Potomac aboard his yacht, the Sequoia. As the boat motored along the river, trailed by a Coast Guard patrol boat, Agent Stout and I sat together in some leather fishing chairs on deck. Stout was a veteran agent. He had served on the presidential detail under both Truman and Eisenhower. He had traveled around the world and had met more prominent leaders and dignitaries than I had even seen on television or in the newspapers. Still, he never boasted about his career, but talked to me about it in a thoughtful and friendly way. Stout described the attempted assassination of Harry Truman at Blair House in Washington when he had been on duty. Truman had been living there while the White House was under renovation. On November 1st, 1950, two members of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party, Oscar Collazo and Gracelio Torresolo, stormed the hotel. Several uniformed White House police officers were wounded in the ensuing confrontation, and one of them, Private Leslie Caulfield, died from his wounds. Agent Stout had been one of the Secret Service agents who had sealed off access to the president's quarters, where Truman was taking a nap. I had read about the quick and courageous actions of the agents at Blair House. In fact, the account of that incident helped fuel my interest in becoming a Secret Service agent, back when I was a state police officer in Peoria. To hear this man describe it with such matter-of-fact calm made me again feel proud that I had been able to join the service. He represented the quiet courage and simple decency that I had always imagined would define the men in this job. I watched Agent Stout as he told me the story, and noticed that even while we chatted, he was relaxed but always alert, never forgetting his duty. When he finished his story, Stout took off his tie pin and held it out to me. "Did you ever get one of these?" I examined the tie pin. It was shaped like a PT boat making its way through the water, and on it was etched, Kennedy 60. "That was Kennedy's campaign pin," Stout said softly. "He gave that to me personally, and now I'm giving it to you." "No, Mr. Stout," I protested, trying to hand the pin back to him. "If I take this, then you won't have one, and it's from the president." "That's okay, Abe. I have plenty of souvenirs from Kennedy and other presidents. This is your first one. Take it. I can get another one. And stop calling me Mr. Stout," he added with a smile. "Call me Stu. Everyone else does." "Thanks, Stu," I laughed. "Thanks a lot." We could see the sun setting as the boat began its return to the dock. Stu Stout laughed, too, for the first time during the trip.
Now, it was a seminal moment in U.S. history that spawned endless conspiracy theories. But now the American government has released the final batch of documents relating to the JFK assassination. The 80,000 pages were made available after President Trump signed an executive order in January. I heard more from our reporter Charlotte Gallagher.
There are thousands and thousands of pages of documents, and they are accounts from CIA agents. There's also, looks like they're ledgers to me of accounting. There's maps. There are all sorts of things in this tranche of documents. The problem is you can't search, you can't filter. So even if you know what you're looking for, it's actually really hard to find it. And this document here, it's a really bad photocopy, and it's actually even hard to read the text. And there's acronyms that people like me and you won't understand. There's codes. Some people have code names. So I think even for the real history buffs that know a lot about JFK and a lot about the JFK assassination, this is going to be something that's going to take a few days, a few weeks to really get to the bottom of.
So it's impossible to say if any new information has emerged so far?
There are a few nuggets that we don't think we knew before. So, for example, there's a conversation between a CIA agent and someone in the KGB, which was the Soviet intelligence agency, and they're talking about Lee Harvey Oswald, who shot JFK, and KGB say, oh, he wasn't one of ours, but when he was in the Soviet Union, we were watching him. We know he had a pretty tempestuous relationship with his wife. We also watched him doing target practice with a rifle, and he wasn't very good at it. They called him a lousy shot. And then there are other documents, and you think, well, how did they relate to the assassination of JFK? It's quite confusing.
So will it be enough to end the conspiracy theories surrounding the assassination?
Absolutely not, Ollie, because I think people that are really invested in the conspiracy theories, and many Americans do not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. They think it was either another government agency, a foreign government, or the mafia. A lot of people are going to say, well, these records are from the US National Archives. They were given to them by the CIA, and the CIA wouldn't have handed over anything embarrassing. They must still have secret records about the assassination. The CIA say that isn't the case, and they've handed over everything. But there are still some redactions. President Trump said none of the documents would be redacted. You'd be able to see what was on them. But on a lot of them, you can see that familiar black rectangle, which is blocking out names and addresses, kind of obvious things, but some documents are still redacted. So I think no one is expecting a huge bombshell. There's going to be gems, I think, but there's not going to be a big smoking gun.
Charlotte Gallagher.
Katherine, Massey, Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. So we will resume chapter 6 as where we will pick up at chapter 6. Make sure. Yep. Nope, sorry, got ahead. So we'll pick up, we will be chapter 4. There we go, chapter 4. Chapter 5, said it right the first time. Got confused with there we go, chapter 5. We'll resume, chapter 5. Got it correct. Number to dial, 605-313-5164, the code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The number again, 605-313-5164, the code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. Fun fact, this is the first time ever in our 13-year book club history we've read 4 consecutive biographies. Biography kings. And they're all basically the same time period. Andreé Blouin and Dr. Maya Angelou, both born in the 1920s, and Mr. Bolden, born just a few years later in the 1930s. So kind of same time period for all of these folks that we've been reading about, and even same generation as Mr. Fuller. Everybody within about the same 10 years or so, maybe in a little narrower, about the same 8-year either way, around 1928 or so. Anyway, let's see. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. Untiljustice@gmail.com. I will say they released so many pages of documents. They said thousands of pages. They had multiple batches of releases of documents this week. Now, I certainly have not seen all of them or even half of them. It's been so many. And I don't think anybody else has in a matter of days to read all those thousands of pages. But I do not expect there to be any sort of, Timmy and Jonathan and Thad killed President Kennedy. I do not expect that to be written down anywhere in the documents. But since the few days that they've released this material, Democracy Now! Today, some of the folks who have been looking through have said, oh, wow, one thing that is here, maybe it doesn't say who killed Kennedy, but wow, there are a massive number of CIA agents, like employed covert operations all over. Like you could just look at the documents and see like, wow, they must have just had massive numbers of white people all over the world spying and doing whatever. And I mean, hey, now we just read those 3 memoirs previously, all connected to the film Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. Now that is CIA through and through, even mentioned by name in Andreé Blouin's memoir. And then, before we got the soundtrack to Coup d'etat, it was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment. And while I was in Jonestown, I even have to rewind, it is very important. We spent all that time on Jonestown. It should be in the forefront of your brain computer. Jonestown happened on November 18, 1978. That is 15 years from the assassination. Hey, November 18, Kennedy assassination, November 22. But Jonestown happened in 1978 in November, in the middle of the Church Committee investigations into the assassination of John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Dr. King. Some of the people got pulled out of that hearing to go and, what? Jim Jones did what? What? In Guyana? What? Mark Lane, all that. Now, I had such a hard time picking a book to read this time around. Woo! Man, I had about 3 or 4 books, some of them related. Just on Kennedy alone, I had the option of 2 or 3 books to pick, even one of them saying Jonestown, Kennedy assassination, King assassination. All of that is connected. That was the book we were going to read. I had it right there. There's no audio book for that text. Say that. Hey, sometimes you can't just rely on audiobooks because they don't make audiobooks of everything. So they didn't make an audiobook of that book. There is an audiobook of this here. So I went with this one because there's a little less energy, but whew, in a different universe, we would have read that other book on how, because also we'll be reading this book April 4, the King assassination. So all connected through and through, which is how you should see these cases, all connected. Anyway, let's see. Folks, and I did not want to read this book. I'm so ashamed now. I don't know. For some reason, I thought this book wasn't going to be very much about racism. I thought he was going to be talking about other things and then get to the assassination and the workplace racism would come later. Whew. I was wrong. And I mean, up until like 2 hours before we went live, I was like, I think I have time to change my mind and pick something else. Forget it. Wow. Glad I did not change my mind. Sorry, Mr. Bolden. I don't know why I thought he was going to be. Sorry, Mr. Bolden. Sorry, Mr. Bolden. Let's see. Folks who have commentary to share on the first portion of the read. And I guess you can let us know, do we have folks who are aware of the Kennedy assassination? Do we have folks who were around when this happened? I don't think we have too many folks who are Fuller's age who listen to the book club, but we have folks who are around, have folks studied the Kennedy assassination. I might even submit everybody, serious counter-racists, you should study the Kennedy assassination and or at least read one book about the Kennedy assassination that is not this book. There are lots. There are lots. Like I just said, now there is a book, Kennedy assassination, Jonestown, and King assassination, all related. And we almost read that one this time around for the book club. But there are so many books on the King assassin, or excuse me, well that too, but on the Kennedy assassination. And I must say, that assassination played an enormous role in my life, even though I wasn't even born when that happened and saw it like decades after all that was over. When Fuller says no event traumatizing like the Kennedy assassination and everything that he lived through. Man, I will tell you, I mean, I have lost sleep over this one, and I wasn't even born when all this happened. I saw all this decades and decades after this was moldy and dusty and old and, whatever. Even still, I remember that when I saw all of this years later as a child, I was like, what? They killed the president? A white man? In broad daylight? In front of a crowd? Under suspicious circumstances? And nothing was done about it? Oh, my Lord. My parents have lied to me. This was my thinking as a child. My parents have lied to me. We are in substantially more danger than I thought because they killed a white man, the president, in broad daylight. I'm not even white. What would they do to me? Oh, my Lord. Childhood was over from that point forward. And, oh, man, I didn't even, for years, all the studying of JFK, I didn't even say, wait a minute, this is racist. In fact, I'm going to give you the quick fast forward on this one. I can't say for all of them because I haven't looked at all the conspiracy theories and all of that. But, oh, man, the main crux for a lot of the folks who, the government lied and it wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald. Why do we have to have all these thousands of documents and they lied and grassy knoll and all of that? Even what you heard from Mr. Bolden immediately, and I mean immediately, all of this, Vietnam is at the center for some of the main. They lied, and why did this have to be done? We got to kill them slant-eyes, and we need control of that part of the world. Who needs control? People classified as white. We got plans for what needs to happen in that part of the world. We got to control these slant-eyes and the gooks and the slopes. Got to Vietnam. Kennedy don't want to do the right thing on Vietnam. He got to go because we got to deal with these slants, gooks, slopes. Moving on from the Japs, we Hiroshima them. But that is that. Now they don't say a system of white supremacy racism, but oh man, most of those conspiracy theories, when you really look at now, why did this happen and all this was, regardless of how many people you think did it, it wasn't. Why did this have to be done? That's what it gets to. And promised them niggers too much. Inviting that nigger king to the White House and got niggers voting and talking about what they want and give us our rights and I'm a man. Ugh, he's got to go. It was a lot of that. Oh, man, I didn't even live through it, but it was a lot of that. Some of that you already heard in this book, but wow. If you are a student of county, and again, if we have any fun, this is one I've said for years, you should ask your parents. Now, this might be another one you find out how pitiful black people are when you go back and ask about Jonestown. Say, what do you remember? I don't know. I was watching Magic Johnson. If you got grandparents or aunties, uncles that were around, were you here, JFK assassinated? What do you remember about that? See what they say. Especially if they were in the South. Oh, my God. Man. And even, you can look right now, all of this about the federal government, we got to do something about it. You just heard, sending federal troops in to protect niggers. You can think about that right now. Joe Biden, President Trump, any of that. Obeezy. They send in federal troops because, I don't know, they feel George Floyd getting a hard time. Y'all messed over Tamir Rice, so we're going to send in. Imagine what the response from white people, the January 6ers, imagine what the response would be. This ain't ancient times. We just talked about 60 years ago, so. Anyway, JFK, enormous impact, big part of the reason why we're here. I would encourage counter-racist scientists to study this moment in history. You heard from Fuller. Most traumatizing moment by far. And since he went all the way back to Pearl Harbor, that would pretty much at this point kind of be most traumatizing event of the last 100 years. What? Wow. Let's see. Folks who dialed in, if you have commentary to share. We have anybody old enough, if you were here when all this happened, feel free. If not, ask your parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles, and let us know if you have done any JFK study, read any books, anything serious other than YouTube. Folks who dialed in with a hand up, line should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Greetings. Can I be heard?
Let's see. I heard Henry in Chicago first. We'll start there.
All right. Greetings, Gus, and greetings to the callers and listeners. Yeah, I think it is important to study this. JFK has been, even though a suspected racist, he has been involved in several things regarding non-white people. You just mentioned Vietnam, the Cuban Missile Crisis in Cuba. So I think it is important to kind of study his assassination and talk about or discuss some of the things that was happening during that time dealing with non-white people, including, dealing with black people here in this country, which his brother Robert Kennedy was the one who put FBI surveillance on Dr. King. So we see how great of a support his family was to black folks. But to the text, schedule a appointment, how he got into the Secret Service. We all know white people, this is how they get these jobs, even though they are the ones who control these jobs. But, that's kind of like their way of getting in. So most of us black folks have to, get in through white people. So that's how Mr. Bolden got in through the Secret Service, because apparently he wasn't going to get in by himself. He connected his adulthood with his childhood, and there was a lot of racist trauma that his family had to endure, in particular his parents, his father. I mean, even though he did say he was hardworking, he had instilled some codes in them of no gambling, no stealing, that type of thing. But obviously, he was suffering from some John Henryism, working two jobs, spending little time at home. But he also traumatized his children with corporal punishment. And then his mother, traumatizing him religiously with the God will make a way when he asked why did God allow black folks to, be victimized under racism, and that's what his mother replied with. So, his childhood, his adulthood was full of racism, but his childhood, he was also victimized by racism along with his family. Reading at a young age, good counter racist practice. Counter racist practice. He said that he would be dead before 30 years old. I find that very common amongst a lot of black males. The man knot, and that reminds me of the man knot. When he said his wife Barbara, I had thought his wife was white, because I looked up Jefferson City, and she said he met her, and it was the 2020 census said it was 74% white, but when I Googled it, it looked like she's a non-white female. So I had a question mark on that, but when I Googled it, her picture looks like she's non-white. I'm not sure, but apparently it looked like she died in 2005. So the Pinkerton Agency got the job through a white man. He said he was a racial pioneer, which I didn't understand that, despite the fact that he's been getting these jobs through white people. So I didn't understand what he meant about being a racial pioneer. We talked about the first black Secret Service agent, somebody who didn't claim his black identity. Apparently, this was one of the 4 responses to white supremacy that Dr. Welsing had taught us, and I think the first one was submission. So a lot of us have submitted to the system of racism. One thing a white supremacist hates more than a Negro is a Negro lover. His encounters with several Secret Service agents who were dissatisfied with President Kennedy. Studying the manuals, processes, and policies, good counter-racist practice at a job doesn't guarantee you won't be fired. Apparently that's what happened to Mr. Bolden, not only fired but charged, but it's always good counter-racist practice to do, to study the manual process and policies. And also during his time of studying the manual, he found the racist cartoon drawn on the memorandum. So that actually opened his eyes to the racism he was going to experience in the Secret Service and dealing with the racist Agent Henderson that he was talking about. So, but I always thought that Bolden's life was very interesting and intriguing. So, okay, and that's it. I'll mute my line.
Much obliged, Henry in Chicago. His life so interesting, they're about to make it to a movie. I don't know if that counts for how good our timing is, but I did see that today. They just had a report this week that this book is being transformed into a major motion picture, not a documentary. I think it's The Unseen Shield, I think is what it's going to be called. I might be wrong about the title, and they might change it before it comes out, but I think that's what it is, The Unseen Shield. Other folks who dialed in with a hand up, proceed. Let's see. Shamika Harris, did you have commentary?
Gus, are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I was trying to wait for a little bit. I thought the other gentleman was going to go ahead. But let me see. I guess my first thing that I noted was the audiobook just started, but it left out the author's note. I don't know. Maybe that's not a big deal, but that was left out. In the text, chapter 1, like right in the first paragraph, he said that he worked for the Pinkerton Detective Agency, and I didn't even know they were still around. Like, when I think of the Pinkertons, I always think of them as solving old-timey crimes like train robberies and Wells Fargo coaches. Like, I just didn't even know they still existed. And Google said that Pinkerton's agency, they established the first criminal database, and it was a forerunner to the U.S. Secret Service. I didn't know that. He said, the white man, Backstrom, he said they had worked together before and were on friendly terms. He'd asked him, are there any Negroes in the Secret Service? But anyway, Backstrom sends him an application in the mail, that white assistance. Let's see. The probation period would end after completion of 2 years of satisfactory service. I thought to myself, if he was on that probationary period now, he might have lost his job a couple of weeks ago. First time he sees JFK, he's in a white Lincoln convertible. I don't think they allow presidents to ride around in convertibles anymore. So after they do the thing, I think this is when he goes and he secures the bathroom, and he hears the people coming down the stairs. He said, before I knew it, John F. Kennedy was striding towards the restroom, surrounded by an impressive entourage, including Mayor Daley, Governor Otto Kerner, Senator Paul Douglas, Congressman William Dawson, and a handful of prominent local politicians. That I've heard Mayor Daley's name before, but Governor Otto Kerner, That's the person who was in commission of the, he was in charge of the Turner report, I think. And so that name stood out to me. At the end of chapter 1, when he says, 6 years later, I stood desperate with fear in the dimly lit corridor of a prison psychiatric ward. Kennedy was dead, felled by an assassin's bullet, and the glory of that electric moment in Chicago barely survived in my memory. I waited for the guard to walk me to one of the barren cells and listen to the soft moans, unintelligible babble, senseless ravings, and occasional harrowing screams of the unfortunate souls confined to that terrible place. I was about to become one of them. Now, unlike Gus and the previous caller, I had never heard of Abraham Bolden, so that's a bit shameful. I am uninformed, but the way he ended that first chapter is really making me want to know the story of what happened to him in between, you know, in those 6 years. I'm really interested. Let me see. When he started talking about when he grew up in Illinois, he was talking about his parents and the way it was. He talked about his mother, and he said she kept house for my father and 6 children. That is a lot of children. Made me think of Bill Russell, his parents making that agreement. They were only going to have 2 children so they could, you know, support them adequately. And let me see. He said, I can't imagine a woman more ideally suited to go through life with my father, a strong, stern man of quiet intelligence who seemed unable to ever stop working. When I was a boy, my father would ride a bicycle between 2 full-time jobs and the B&O Railroad during the day, at the B&O Railroad during the day, and the Swiss Packing Company at night. He said he was unable to ever stop working. I mean, he has 6 children, and it's him and the wife. That's 8 people. And you know, I thought about that. There's 24 hours per day, and he's working at least 16 of them. So it's 8 hours left. You're supposed to sleep for 8 hours. There's no way you're going to do that. You got to include the bicycle commute time, time to eat, time to spend with your children, and time to, you know, do all that stuff he was talking about doing, fixing around the house and trying to make things better. That sounds incredibly difficult. He also said, I think my father found something therapeutic and soothing about the hard physical labor. Now, that could be true. I don't know his father, but I think that his dad performed that physical labor because he thought he had to take care of his attempted family. It wouldn't be easy or inexpensive to feed, clothe, and care for 6 children, yourself and an attempted spouse. That would be incredibly difficult. Let's see. We children grew up knowing that our father wouldn't tolerate any of us straying any slightly from his strict code of proper behavior. There was to be no disobedience, lying, fighting, cursing, gambling, smoking, drinking, or hanging out with unsavory characters. Unsavory characters made me think of Delectable Negro by Vincent Woodard. And also, it just made me realize I never hear people referred to as savory. I've heard unsavory and less savory, but yeah, I just never hear a person referred to as savory. Let's see. I thought it was pretty cool that he went to school and got to practice music with Miles Davis. And then later on, he said a bunch of my friends, including Floyd, Moses, Spook Eye, and Aaron, we were playing ball out in the street in front of Brother Albert's candy store. Now, I thought when you're talking about people that you're friendly with, or, you know, that y'all are cool, yeah, you call them by their first name. And that was a striking difference in between him and Miss Angelou, the way she called people by their first and last names. In the last book when she was talking, I just kept thinking about the way she used James Baldwin's first and last name like over and over and over and over. I thought that was weird. So that seemed like a more normal way to talk about your associates. He says, I recall confronting her one day. Mom, I said sorrowfully, I hear the preaching and the singing and the people shouting and crying around the church, but nothing is coming of it. Things are not getting any better for our people. If God loves everybody, why is there so much misery and unhappiness all around us? It's as if God doesn't care about us. Mom believed that the people in church were all doing their best to do the Lord's work and be good Christians, and she told me so. That's not what he asked. She comforted me with something I must have heard her say 1,000 times. God will make a way somehow. Now, the question he posed to his mother, I think that was an excellent question. Also, the response she gave, not really an answer to the question, and it was just a very common sort of response. I think we, non-white people collectively, do not seem to engage in critical thinking when it comes to religion. He said, I knew these presences, though undefined, were to be taken seriously. And in my view, whenever there's something that's spoken about regularly and or frequently, but it's not defined, I think these things require critical thought. An effort should be made to define a thing that is undefined. It helps me to think about things in a more logical manner. These terms and concepts make up a large part of most people's language, and people seem so confident about the ideas, but when questioned, the answers typically don't make sense. It's just a lot of cliches, sayings, similes, metaphors, but nothing conclusive. It's not scientific at all, kind of like the answer his mom gave. Let me see. Oh, he was when he was working with the other gentleman in the Secret Service, the other non-white person, they said he was the first black person. And he said, don't call me a Negro. I'm no Negro. I'm Puerto Rican. So don't ever call me a Negro again. Exclamation mark. Look at my hair and the color of my skin. Do I look black to you? No. Oh, and he also said he added a few uncomplimentary remarks about blacks in general, comments that stuck with me a long time and tainted my association with him for the rest of my tenure with the Secret Service. I wish he would have shared those remarks. That would have been interesting. And also, I know plenty of people who are classified as black who really try to put distance between themselves and the other black people. Things like, I'm half white, or bringing up ancestors that are without the dreaded black classification. People just do not want to be in the double whammy status. Most members of my attempted family think and speak like this. It is not just this so-called Puerto Rican Secret Service agent. I don't know. I think that's quite a bit that I've shared, so I'll leave off there. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Much obliged, Shamika Harris. The number 605-313-5164. Nobody wants to be Negro. 605-313-5164. Decode 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. As opposed to God will make a way, in the last memoir we read, we got stay black and die. That's about the size of Negro culture. What we gonna do? The position black people in. God gonna make a way. Stay black and die. Woo! We ain't made no progress. What is it in 2025? What they say? Black Lives Matter? We ain't really made no progress. Cliches and Anyway, let's see. *61 if you have commentary. Let me nab one email. Greetings, Gus, listeners, callers. I'm very interested in this text. I've read articles and interviews in the past regarding the author and look forward to more detailed information regarding his experiences. Introduction. 1. The impact of John Kennedy's assassination radiated out in all directions like the ripples from a stone dropped into water. Metaphor. The event had such force that we still feel it today, nearly 45 years later. The assassination of Dr. King and 9/11, I think, had similar impacts. These many decades later, I still remember where I was and what I was doing when it occurred. I think it may have been one of the first events of this magnitude in which one had continual live television news reports. I know many people have talked about how they sat in front of the television when Kennedy was assassinated, that they just sat in front of the TV the entire weekend. He was killed on a Saturday, and so they just sat. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. It was on a Friday. Sorry. It was on a Friday. Sorry. He was killed on a Friday, and so they sat in front of the television that whole weekend. And in fact, Lee Harvey Oswald was killed himself on television on Sunday, live television, I think. So, yeah, massive for a number of reasons. Chapter 1. I learned several weeks later that I had just missed passing the test. Backstrom suggested that I could enter the Secret Service under a Schedule A appointment. I wonder what percentage of race soldiers during this time period entered due to the test versus previous experience. They have all kinds of loopholes and such. 2. Mayor Richard Daley at McCormick Place. See Richard J. Daley, a horribly racist mayor, great-grandson, says in letter, Chicago Times, Care Spalding and Tom Schuba, November 20, 2020. That's easy to believe. Dr. King might even co-sign on that one pretty easily. McCormick Place, named after Robert R. McCormick, who was owner and publisher of the Chicago Tribune, is considered a Nazi sympathizer during World War II. See Bad News for Jews, how 6 U.S. and UK media moguls aided the nascent Nazi regime. Chapter 2, East St. Louis, Illinois, on January 19, 1935. People who were born or lived for a significant period of time in East St. Louis, Illinois. Miles Davis, jazz musician Katherine Dunham, known as Queen Mother of Black Dance, Ike and Tina Turner, Josephine Baker, Jackie Joyner Kearse, Olympic track star. Number 2, I recall confronting her one day. Mom, I said sorrowfully, I hear the preaching and Shamika Harris mission this morning. Excellent question. It reminded me of our guest, Dr. William Jones, the late. His book is God a White Racist? Question. Guest on the program in April 2009. Came out of the gates like we knew what we were doing. But that's the whole premise of that question. You look around at the plantation, say there is a God. Does he hate me and the other black people? Is God a white racist? Dr. Jones on the cows. Number 3. Other woman, a small blonde who had been pecking away at her typewriter, looked at the ad, then looked at me, then shook her head. I don't think they're hiring. Middle-aged man, the woman explained how I'd come in looking for a job and how she was handling the situation, but he stopped her short, gave him an application. Cannot have a system of racism, white supremacy, without white women. Facts. Number 4, breaking down the color barriers. Breaking down color barriers. This is a commonly used metaphor. We can't talk without metaphors when discussing racism. 5. Guylan held weekly staff meetings, usually opening with some banter and jokes, some which had clear racial overtones. I'm going to say that as a metaphor. What is an overtone? And that's one of those I'm pinpointing specifically. I don't even really hear people use the term overtone unless they're talking about food, music. That term only gets used for, I don't hear any, the people, overtones of what? What are you, liberal overtones? Like, people don't say that. Like, conservative overtones? Southern people don't say that. It's just racial overtones. Ooh, I got notes and oregano overtones. Even that is like minimal. Music, I'll hear that a little bit, but I mean, what is a racial overtone? Did he say a racist joke? He called you, Negro is not no overtone of nothing. That's just tacky and racist. Let's, in fact, did the same thing as white people. What's the jokes? I know you remember some of these jokes, man. If you got the whole cartoon and what have you, and I'm sure they repeated some of these jokes over. Man, nobody wants to give up the jokes. Anyway, and they said that he'd been accepted by the club. I wasn't buying it. I made my resentment known. They developed what he thought was an amicable relationship. I loved how that was phrased. Always try to cut it off at the knees. See the guest with Walter Beach. One thing I would say with these racist jokes, though, or any of this banter, write it down as opposed to jumping up and down. And you ain't gonna talk to me like oh my God. Bust out your iPhone. Or back in the day, I guess you'd had to bust out your number 2 pencil and notepad, but whip it out. Say that again. And just write it down every time and keep on rolling. Like, I'm not mad. I'm not ready to bust nobody in the face. I just date, time, and what was it again? Like, write it in. This time, when that coon Gus says, what's the racist job? I'm going to have a whole page for it. I bet you they'll change their behavior then. Same thing I recommend. That's how you know you got a good code. You can say it would work in 1960. It would work in 2025. Let's see. Chapter 3. In fact, another agent in the Secret Service had been touted as the first Negro in the agency. Lauren told us about this one too. All the talk and celebration about being the first is ubiquitous in the global system of racism, white supremacy. It is a deception to make it seem as if progress is being made. Perhaps racial categories serve as such a powerful tool in the system of racism, white supremacy, and everyone just wants to get away from black. We don't want to replace racism. We just want to get away from the Negroes. We just want to get away from the Negroes. Like, we'll get to that justice later, maybe. Just get away from Leroy. Number 2, I believe the Kennedys' commitment to racial equality was deeply felt and sincere. Victims guarantee qualified. Suffering is a great equalizer, and I had seen something in Kennedy's eyes that made me understand that he had known suffering of his own and could empathize with people of vastly different experience. Wow. And he got all this from looking in his eyes. I guess Kennedy was greatly pained. Hey, not all white peoples is racist. Incidentally, this is another book or another opportunity to point out how frequently people will talk about Dr. King and they will have to insist that old polecat Dr. King was stepping out on Coretta and sleeping around and he had all these affairs and they even slipped that in Selma. Remember Ava DuVernay's project from not that long ago? They do not do this about Kennedy. Now, we haven't heard nothing about him catting around and all these affairs and what have you, and they got lots of knowledge about this. This is not disputed, but they just don't talk about it. I mean, they continue with King in a really salacious way. When, again, I keep saying, so is the source for all of this the same people who participated in spying on and perhaps killing him? FBI, COINTELPRO, Hoover, that's our source for all of this? We did read Coretta Scott King's memoir. She didn't say nothing about no affair in her memoir. My Life, My Love, My Legacy. Number 3, Secret Service. Many of the agents with whom I worked were products of the South. Chilling, racist remarks referring to Kennedy as that nigger lover whose efforts to force integration in the South and enforce other civil rights initiatives were screwing up the country. Going off code can be deadly for people classified as white. Not as deadly as being a Negro. But hey, you cannot be ignorant about racism and be classified as white. That does not work. You will get in trouble with other white people. They're not going to tolerate you being ignorant and messing up to that. That don't happen. That don't happen. Number 4. Volatile times for race relations in America. What does that mean? I did not see race relations in Fuller's word guide. Maybe we should add it to our own word guide. Facts. And I think I've actually written about that term before and saying do not use. I'm going to have to check my blog, but I think it might be one of those up there. And I know I said that all throughout Sundown Towns. Like, what is he talking about? Like, this book is so constructive, but it would be way better if you're talking about you got billboards that say, read Negro and run. That is not no races relating, whatever that means. And that term also suggests there are more than one race. No way. And it ain't the black race, black first. Don't put that tacky nonsense on my page. I don't have nothing to do with no black first. That's also multiple races. Nope. One race. One race. That's another. Why you listen to Fuller and then you just gonna be about black first, black first, black first? Fuller ain't say nothing about that. He said it's one race. 5. Pierre Salinger and his assistant Andrew Hatcher, born in 1923, founder of the 100 Black Men organization, was a journalist for the San Francisco Sun, reporter, Dr. Goodlet, Jonestown, had a role in numerous Democratic political campaigns during the 1950s and 60s, was on the staff of the California governor, Pat Brown, serving as a labor commissioner. I bet he had lots of front row view to Jonestown. 6. Secret Service office studying the manual as I had been instructed. I found my copy folded in half with a crude caricature penciled on the back. The drawing showed a man with obviously exaggerated negroid features, a large flat nose, wide lips. See C.O.W.S broadcast neutralizing workplace racism every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Chapter 4, Goldwater, on the other hand, made no audible greeting, nor did he try to shake my hand. Republican politician who is credited with having a role in black people shifting voting support to the Democratic Party with his being against the 1964 Civil Rights Act. C, why did black voters flee the Republican Party in the 1960s? NPR code switch, Karen Grigsby Bates. Number 2, Stu Stout, for example, the agent who greeted me when I first got there represented the other side of the coin. A metaphor for the supposed good white folks. Again, not all white peoples are racist. 3, I examined the tie pin. It was shaped like a PT boat making its way through the water, and on it was etched Kennedy 60. Reference to the PT boat, which was used during World War II in the Pacific War Theater. Mr. Fuller would so love this. I bet he might have known about or read this book. 109 was the serial number of the one that Kennedy commanded. He was injured during his command, resulting in lifelong back problems. Much of the history told about the time around Kennedy's service is considered self-serving mythology. See The Truth About JFK and his PT boat's collision with a Japanese destroyer during World War II. Y'all can check that out. More reading, more important than watching television. Let's see. See if I get quick note in before we get to our second audio segment. Then we'll get retired firefighter as well. Let's see. All right, I have time to get in a few quick notes. Let's see. I guess number 1, he mentioned his wife. They didn't include the dedication with this book either, and this book isn't that long, so they could have, but the very first part is the dedication, my beloved wife Barbara, who through 49 years of our marriage has been a source of strength and help to me as I struggle to overcome the many obstacles of this life. Whoa! How many of you know a black dude that's been married for 49 years? Jiminy. Let's see. Shout to both of them. Some kind of counter-racism code to get through all of that. The author's note I did think was important as well. That introduction right there where he says, the assassination November 22, 1963, what I do know is that the president died because of a failure of the security around him, a situation that some of us saw coming. That right there is why thousands of documents and all the to hear so many, because this is not the first time I have heard someone who works Secret Service, military, security clearance, where they looked at this live time and said, oh my God, matter of fact, what Lauren said, they do not allow the president to ride around in an open convertible and what have you. They have serious codes about all of that. And they had codes at the time when this happened, and people who are aware of those codes looked at what happened at Dallas and immediately said, oh man, something or some things are awry, because wow, all kinds of, it's not even just one rule, all kinds of rules are being broken here. Like what, Gus? Well, they say he was shot from the 3rd or 6th floor of the book depository in Dealey Plaza. Apparently, they have a code about that. President is not supposed to be riding by overhangs and buildings and stuff, because you could have a sniper lurking, unless they got, what just happened with President Trump? Sniper on the roof? And they said the same thing then. Didn't follow code. Somebody got to get fired. What's going on here? Not supposed to have that. And he wasn't even on a high roof like what they had in Dallas. All that's supposed to be cleared, or we're not going by this at all. And not supposed to be out, what she said, not supposed to be out open top. Supposed to have a bubble covering on that or something else. Like, what rules are being followed? None of that. That right there, what is going on? We got codes here. That's niggardly to be out here and you just do anything any old kind of way. We are classified as white. We only got one Negro on the Secret Service and he ain't here. Duh. We got a code, and that code is not on display in that right there is one of many, many things that people want to, what is going on here? Why we got to go through all these documents? Let's see. Chapter 1. As we rode along one of the intended motorcade routes, I turned to Agent Backstrom. Are there any Negroes? Had worked together and were on friendly terms. There's lots of friendly white people, amicable terms. Like, woof, that stood out to me. And this is in the 1960s. This is like, put it exactly, so 1960s. This is exactly 5 years removed from the lynching of Emmett Till. For real, for real. This could be the friendliest white person ever. He is not my friend. He is a courteous, kindly race soldier at best. That's the Schedule A appointment. You all talked about that. When he said Daley's political machine helped deliver a victory to Kennedy, though means not everyone considered legitimate, you mean white people been rigging and stealing elections since before January 6th? For real? Matter of fact, didn't we hear about that in Jonestown, San Francisco, all the election fraud and rigging and all the rest of it, even doing that in Guyana? They put the nigger in the bathroom to guard all that. Yes, Otto Kerner Commission report, Shamika Harris. He said, Chapter 2, the shadows that hinted at the darkness that was to become. What kind of, and all of that is so lame. People talk that way all the time. Like, any metaphor where you are about to describe a bad time as niggardly and black, like, I'm being lazy, I'm supporting racism. Figure out a new way to articulate something bad or ominous. You could, hey, as opposed to all that, ominous. Ooh, you could use a new word. We do not have to always equate bad times with black. Let's see. And then on the same page, the blanket of white snow would have added an unreal air of cleanliness and tranquility to the rows of wood-framed shanties. Now, I don't dig on the snow because I don't like cold, but jeez, the bad has got to be black and the white is always clean and tranquil. White people, white snow, clean and tranquil. Let's see. Anything else? I thought of Bill Russell, too, when he talks about all this corporal punishment. Actually, I thought of Mahmoud Abdul Rauf as well. In fact, I thought of Delectable Negro when he said unsavory, but I thought of it earlier when he said, my father used to say your family comes first, and he lived that principle every day of his life. When there wasn't quite enough food to go around, he'd sit quietly by himself in the living room while the children ate. Are you out of your flipping mind? Are you out of your flipping mind? Chris, what big piece of chicken, Black Miss Andrew? You didn't even get a chicken wing? He didn't get nothing? Where's the black male privilege? Where is the black? He didn't get a hush puppy. He He worked 2 jobs, rode a bike, put the plumbing in. Oh, we don't have enough food because we had all those children that we can't support. So I'm going to just sit over here and think about something savory. That is black male privilege, circa 1960. Come on, man. Miles Davis is very black. I don't know if that has something to do with his talent. I did contrast with that, his mom being very pale, I guess, but very melanated, talented Miles Davis. Already got the religion. Anything else I need to get in? Got the hiring part. White women did not want to hire him. Breaking down color barriers is another tacky metaphor. Oh my God. He said J. Lloyd Stocks had a habit of making colored boy jokes. Woo! Man, not. Boys and gals, when he knew I could hear him, he liked to horse around, pantomiming, shuffling gait and slow drawl that formed the caricature of an uneducated Southern Negro. What he said, and then when he knew I could hear it. That ain't ignorant. That, and I'm so glad he gave us lots of that. That's one too, like, oh my Lord. I know they got the regulations and such. I would have had to fight not to pull my phone out and be like, oh my God, I'm fitting to get this on TikTok today. Like, oh Lord, look at this, look at this, look at this. What does it mean to be white? Let's see. All these, I was thinking this memorandum, Executive Order 10925, that President Trump probably just vetoed this. All this about, because we can have segregated facilities now. So, yeah, I think he probably, like this week, he probably just vetoed this. Like, oh yeah, we get all this DEI nonsense. Like, whatever. Let's see. And he said, black brother, he got the Puerto Rican fella, and he said, this your black brother. You can't beat down your black brother. Come on. Let's see. And the African American voters loved Kennedy. I've heard that universally. I think, isn't that in The Help? Where it might not, is it The Help or one of the other ones? One of the really popular Negro films from, I think it's got to be The Help, where they got John Kennedy's picture up on the wall. It'll be Dr. King, John Kennedy, and White Jesus. So that's like 2 White Jesuses really, and then Dr. King. I mean, wow. Black people, not all white peoples is racist. And I'll leave it. Anything else? Got the bookmark. He said racist. It's a lot of cliches. Miami, reading the memo left me totally deflated because they didn't want any niggers at the hotels in Miami. Shout out to firefighter. We'll get to that. The memo left me totally deflated. It was all too clear to me that the racism Kennedy wanted so much to stamp out in the country was alive and well. Racism is anytime. 1960, 2009, 2025, 1809. Racism is alive and well. The niggers, now we medical apartheid doing right poorly, but racism, white supremacy, alive and well. We will get to audio segment 2. Retired firefighter will be on deck once we return. Abraham Bolden, who is still also alive and well. How about that? Racism and the author Abraham Bolden alive and well. 90 years old. He might even be here to be on the red carpet for the movie. I think it's called Unseen Shield. I'm going to have to double check to make sure, but right on to Mr. Bolden. Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy, audio segment 2.
Chapter 5. When the president returned from Palm Beach, he went to join his wife and family at Glen Ora Farm in Virginia. Kennedy needed to rest his back for a few days, having aggravated a lingering problem. Dr. Janet Travell, the president's personal physician, attended him there, which, along with the crutches he occasionally used, sparked a great deal of speculation in the press regarding his condition, although the press generally refrained from using photos of him on crutches. Dr. Travell's presence was significant for other reasons, at least to me. She represented another gesture on Kennedy's part to create opportunities for all Americans. By placing women and members of minorities in high-profile positions, he was leading by example. It seemed that the president was always on the move. After returning from Virginia, he intended to spend the 4th of July holiday at the Kennedy family compound at Hyannisport on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. I would be traveling there with the Secret Service detail. Standard procedure on such a trip was as follows. The Secret Service detail that had direct responsibility for the president would fly ahead on a chartered plane so that they could be on the ground and ready to assume their protective duties as soon as the president walked off his plane, Air Force One. A few senior agents would fly with the president, and another detachment of agents would remain at the airport of departure in case some emergency required Air Force One to turn around and come back. Customarily, the advance flight also carried a sizable contingent of the White House press corps, who also wanted to be waiting on the ground when the president landed, especially the photographers. The press corps and the Secret Service agents had been through this routine often enough and all seemed to know one another. The revelry began as soon as the plane was in the air, with lots of noisy joking and chatter. Pretty soon, a stewardess came walking down the aisle, passing out liquor in those little airplane bottles free of charge to anyone who wanted it. Soft drinks were also available. I asked for soda. The rules forbidding agents from drinking on duty were as clear as they could be. As I've said, the Secret Service isn't a very large organization, and like every place else, people talk. Within the service, the drinking and carousing on the part of the White House detail was nearly legendary. I had heard plenty of stories about the agents assigned to the White House detail and decided this was my chance to see if there was any truth to the stories. In the course of the short flight, I managed to stroll the length of the cabin. Several agents had what appeared to be mixed drinks in their hands. 2 empty liquor bottles were sitting on the tray table in front of Agent Harvey Henderson, who happened to be acting as the shift supervisor that day. As soon as we landed at Otis Air Force Base, agents took up positions by a roped-off area of the runway where a substantial crowd had gathered to greet the president. Massachusetts State Police officers provided additional security. When Air Force One arrived, Kennedy stepped off the plane and walked straight toward the crowd, reaching over the barricade to shake hands with the many well-wishers, while the state troopers, with arms outstretched, held them back. The mood was light and friendly. Kennedy was clearly happy to be back in Massachusetts on this hot summer day. Suddenly, I felt a tug on my coat sleeve. I turned quickly to discover that my arm was in the grasp of one of the uniformed state troopers. "Let me see some ID," he demanded. I simply pointed at the Secret Service identification pin on my lapel and tried to keep moving, to maintain my position in the line of protection as the president moved along in front of the crowd. The trooper, however, didn't let go. I forcefully jerked my arm free and strode off toward the president, but out of the corner of my eye, I could see the trooper taking a step to follow me. "Leave him alone!" another agent shouted, trotting over. "He's with Kennedy." That agent stayed at my side until Kennedy climbed into the helicopter that was waiting to ferry him to his compound. My shift of agents piled into a big station wagon to head toward Hyannisport. The smell of alcohol filled the car, and it seemed to me that several of the agents were slurring their speech and showing other effects of their in-flight drinking. At least 3 of them were clearly in no condition to respond properly to any emergency that might develop. We drove past an administration building on the base and could see Air Force men and women strolling in their neatly pressed uniforms, prompting comments about the good-looking Women's Air Corps members. Suddenly, one of the agents in the car, Bob Foster, pointed out the window and shouted in his thick Southern accent, "There goes a nigger!" Foster quickly reached up and cupped his hand in front of his mouth as if trying to catch the words he had just spoken. "Oops!" He was pointing at a young African-American woman walking through the base, seemingly proud and happy in her Women's Air Corps uniform, unaware of the slurs aimed at her by this representative of the U.S. government. I said nothing, nor did anyone else in the car, although one agent flinched noticeably at the comment. Others were clearly startled and turned to stare at Foster. Foster gave me a sidelong glance. My blood was boiling, and once again I had to resist the temptation to reach over and punch one of my colleagues. At the compound, Agent Henderson took over the wheel of the station wagon from the driver who had picked us up and drove the agents on our shift to a large white cottage in town, about 5 minutes away. After the memo I had read back at the White House, I had been apprehensive about the living arrangements, but there was nothing unusual here. Secret Service agents used this cottage whenever the president was in Hyannisport. It had a large wooden porch across the front, a sitting area with a number of bedrooms off it, and a well-equipped kitchen. The large backyard had a patio and a brick barbecue pit, and led into thick woods. The cottage was relatively secluded, about 50 yards from the nearest house. As we hadn't eaten since we left Washington, everybody chipped in some money, and Henderson and Foster drove off to buy food and drinks. They came back in about an hour with groceries, along with a healthy supply of beer and bourbon. We spent the afternoon and evening eating, drinking, chatting, and watching television. About 8 p.m., I overheard Henderson asking agents, not including me, if they wanted to go into town. He drove off with a couple of other men. In addition to the drinking, the White House detail also had a reputation for womanizing. Stories circulated throughout the service about arrogant agents in Washington who fancied themselves playboys, and sure enough, I was awakened at about 2 a.m. by the sounds of women's voices. I got up, used the bathroom, and wandered to the windows overlooking the front of the cottage. I heard the laughter of a woman and some men coming from one of the bedrooms, and a little later on saw 2 agents drive away with a couple of women in the station wagon. The scene at the Kennedy compound the next day seemed straight out of a Life magazine photo spread. Large, stately homes were spaced out along a lawn that sloped down into a sandy beach. Children were playing everywhere. The president's father, Joseph Kennedy, sat on a porch overlooking the ocean, his legs wrapped in a blanket, with his wife Rose at his side. On the water, a small sailboat with a group of boisterous passengers tacked back and forth, expertly piloted by Ted Kennedy. Later in the afternoon, adults and children joined in a happy game of touch football. Fittingly enough for the President of the United States, John Kennedy quarterbacked his team, despite the evident pain in his back. One morning, I was seated at a post of duty near the compound's beach when Jacqueline Kennedy and her little daughter, Caroline, came strolling hand in hand down the path from the house. Mrs. Kennedy offered a cheerful, "Good morning," which I acknowledged a little nervously. "Will you please watch Caroline for me while I take a swim?" she asked with a smile as she guided the girl to a chair next to me. "I'd be happy to." "I won't be gone long," Mrs. Kennedy said. She spread out her blanket, adjusted her bathing cap, and slid gracefully into the water. Caroline sat quietly for a few minutes, looking at me from across the table, then got up and went to play in the sand. Finally, her curiosity got the better of her, and she walked back to me. "What's your name?" "My name is Abraham," I told her in the playful voice I used with my own small children. "Abraham?" she repeated. "Yes, like Abraham Lincoln." She regarded me for a moment, pondering her next question. "Do you have a little girl?" I told Caroline that I had a little girl about the same age as she was. "Her name is Avia." "Can she come and play with me?" "She's far away in Chicago," I answered, gesturing up over the ocean toward the sky. "I can go to Chicago," Caroline offered. "Okay," I said. "When you come to Chicago, the 2 of you can play together." Caroline went back to playing in the sand, but later, after her mother had finished swimming and the 2 of them were walking back up toward the house, I heard Caroline ask, "Mommy, can we go to Chicago?" I never heard Mrs. Kennedy's answer. Later that afternoon, the President took a cruise around Nantucket Sound on his 52-foot yacht, the Marlin. It was one of many boating excursions he and his family took during this holiday visit. I wasn't assigned to the yacht or to the follow-up Coast Guard boat, but remained behind, patrolling part of the beach. When the yacht returned, the President was met on the dock by his brother Robert. As the two men approached me, I turned my back to them in order to secure the perimeter, as was my duty. To my surprise, the President stopped behind me and called out, "Mr. Bolden." I turned and walked toward them. "Have you met my brother Bobby?" he asked, just as he had back in the Oval Office. "Bobby, this is Mr. Bolden. I'm sure he knows who you are, since both of you are in the same business," he joked. "Mr. Bolden is the first Negro on the White House detail." "Glad to meet you, Mr. Bolden." Bobby Kennedy held out his hand to mine. "I'm glad to see the Secret Service making progress in this area. It's long overdue. Where's your home office?" "Chicago, sir." "Oh, that's Mayor Daley's territory." "Yeah," laughed President Kennedy. "He's one of Mayor Daley's enforcers." Bobby Kennedy asked me why I hadn't come into the FBI. "We're always looking for good people. We have several Negro agents, and they've been with us for many years." When I answered that I had indeed thought about the FBI, but felt I couldn't qualify without a law or accounting degree, he said, "Things like that can always be waived. If you are still interested, you should make out the application in the Chicago office. We're looking to hire more Negro agents very soon." The President kept the conversation going. "Do you intend to make a career in police work, Mr. Bolden?" "No, Mr. President. Someday I would like to be a diplomat to one of the African nations." "Do you speak any of the African languages?" "No, sir." "Well," the President said, "I'll be around for 7 or 8 more years. You should enroll in a school of languages. I think Berlitz has a school of languages right in Chicago." His brother mentioned that they sent some agents there for training. "Look into it when you get back to Chicago," the President continued. "Let me know when you have completed one of the courses. If you qualify, I may be able to help you achieve your goal." As I thanked the President, I was taken by the contrast between the two brothers. While John Kennedy's eyes were soft and welcoming, Robert's were hard and piercing. Robert had a reputation for ruthlessness in those days, and now that I was in his presence, I could understand why. He gave the impression that he could and would do whatever needed to be done, regardless of the consequences or of the pain his decisions might cause. I sensed that the President's first considerations would always involve mercy or compromise, whereas Bobby's instincts were to achieve total victory. If one was a natural diplomat, the other was a warrior. They complemented each other perfectly, and it seemed that the President had chosen the ideal Attorney General for those turbulent times. The President turned and began walking toward the house, but stopped abruptly and clutched at his right hip and lower back as a grimace crossed his face. His brother offered to get a golf cart for him, but Kennedy looked back over his shoulder at the little flotilla of boats offshore, full of press photographers with high-powered cameras. Determined to show the nation a strong, able leader at all times, he pushed back his shoulders and stood nearly perfectly straight. "I'll walk." As the two men strode away, I looked up and saw Harvey Henderson standing some distance off, his arms folded across his chest and his gaze fixed on me. My shift was just about over, and as we drove back to the cottage together a short while later, Henderson was unusually quiet. Clearly, there was something on his mind. I was on duty the next time Kennedy took his yacht out for a cruise. I was about to climb down into the follow-up boat when I noticed Agent Henderson on the yacht, in conversation with the President. When they finished, the President disappeared into the cabin, and Henderson motioned for me to leave the follow-up boat. "There's been a change in your assignment today," he said. "You're on the yacht." I sat down in one of the leather-decked chairs as the yacht made its way out into Nantucket Sound. Not too long into the journey, the galley door swung open. A crisply dressed U.S. Navy sailor stepped out carrying a silver tray laid out with a silver bowl, some crackers, and a glass of juice. He marched straight over to me and set the tray on my lap. "Sir, The president would like you to have some lunch." The sailor did an about-face and was gone before I could answer. My astonishment didn't stop me from making short work of the bowl of delicious clam chowder. The sail was uneventful, highlighted by a short stop to follow Mrs. Kennedy to swim. Afterward, Agent Henderson again said next to nothing on the drive back to the cottage, but once we arrived and settled in to relax for the evening, I could sense his restlessness, which seemed to border on agitation. Agents were breaking out the drinks. Henderson sat on the living room couch, opened a beer, and leveled a cold, hard stare at me, which I did my best to ignore. He kept it up through 2 or 3 quick beers, until he suddenly spoke. "Bolden." "Yeah, Harvey?" "I'm going to tell you something, and I don't want you ever to forget it." The sound of the South was heavy in his voice. "You're a nigger. You were born a nigger, and when you die you'll still be a nigger. You will always be nothing but a nigger. So act like one." Henderson spaced the words out slowly for emphasis, but his voice was rising. The words hung in the room as every agent stared silently at Harvey Henderson. He had moved his body to the edge of the couch. His feet were flat on the floor, and he was clutching his beer bottle. He was like an animal, poised to spring forward if I made any move toward him. If I had ever doubted that Henderson had planted that memo and cartoon back in the White House, I knew it for certain now, as surely as I knew that he was baiting me, trying to lure me into a fight. Thoughts of Jackie Robinson raced through my mind. I do not mean to equate myself with a hero of Robinson's stature, but in that moment I thought about the years of locker-room taunts that he had endured, and the many times his white teammates had tried to pick fights with him, just so they could humiliate him. I'd dealt with racism my entire professional life, once even having to pull my gun on a motorist who refused to be ticketed by a nigger. But here I was, faced with a representative of my own nation's government, the acting head of our president's personal guard, my supervisor. I'm sure he wanted nothing more than to beat me bloody, but he also wanted me to disgrace myself by losing control. I eyed Harvey Henderson, a big, powerful man, drunk and full of hatred, and knew that if we were to go at it, there could be no mercy. I would have to send him to his God before he sent me to mine. I looked at him squarely in the eyes. "I love you too, Harvey," I said, and walked out to the porch. "You shouldn't have said that, Harvey," said Agent Tucker, who then followed me outside. "Don't pay any attention to him, Abe," Tucker told me. "He gets like that when he's drinking." Tucker went back into the cottage. I kept on walking for a long time. When I got back to the cottage, I sat a while longer on the porch steps, weary in body and soul, and realized that I was ready to go back to Chicago. My mother had taught me not to remain where I was clearly not wanted. The 4th of July was a big event at the Kennedy compound, with a picnic that seemed to last most of the day. The rich and famous were arriving, including Sergeant Shriver and Peter Lawford, but none of them held any appeal for me. I had met John F. Kennedy, and that was all I needed. My shift was over, and while most of the off-duty agents returned to the compound that night for food and drinks and fireworks, I stayed behind at the cottage and ate some sandwiches in solitude. I couldn't wait for morning to come, and with it my chance to return home. At the compound the next day, I was told to report to the helicopter pad in front of the mansion. I would be returning with the president. The helicopter ride was a first for me and all but took my breath away. Air Force One made an even bigger impression with its multitude of suites and rooms, all elegantly appointed, and the banks of elaborate communications equipment staffed by uniformed personnel. Usually, the Secret Service agents who flew with the president on Air Force One were the most senior personnel, veterans of long standing on the White House detail, but someone had assigned me there that day, and I had a notion of who was behind it. As he walked through the main cabin where the agents were seated, John Kennedy acknowledged me with a nod and a smile. My intuition told me that he wanted me to remain in Washington, to become a permanent member of the White House detail, and my presence on the plane was a gesture toward that end. As gratified as I was by this idea, I couldn't shake my deep sadness over recent events. It seemed to me that I had no choice but to cast off any thoughts of staying on.
Katherine Massey Book Club. Man, I have to say it again, like, wow. One, a pretty black lady years ago, I think Obeezy was in the White House like years ago, said, aren't you into the Kennedy assassination thing, and that had a big impact, you know, black fella, Mr. Bolden, he was on the service and everything. I think you would love this book, Gus T. And Gus said, well, I did get the book, so I didn't ignore. I did get the book, but I did not read it. And then I looked for about every reason possible to not read this book. This time, I told you I had multiple Kennedy books. There's so many. And then, you know, there are lots of other books too. So, lots of choices, but wow. Wow. Much, my bad, Mr. Bolden. My fault. But hey, we stuck to it. We did stick to it, and we are here. Time is right and exact. And we're still a little bit ahead because we could have been really lame and lazy and waited, and then when the movie comes out, like, oh man, they wrote a book about this? At least we will be way early for the movie. The number 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound, press star 61 if you would like to participate. I guess pause. George Foreman passed away. They just notified since we were on the air. Like, this has been the lamest year of like ever. George Foreman, Neely Fuller Jr. Her name just came to me. Roberta Flack. That's it. Angie Stone. Like, it's just Roy Ayers. It's just been an endless stream. Mama D, the fire victims endless stream. George Foreman on the list now as well. What a lame year 2025 has been. Anyway, but I was correct. The movie The Unseen Shield, that's what the project on Mr. Bolden film will be called whenever it comes out down the road. Alrighty, number 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound, press star 61 if you would like to participate. I cannot believe he is thinking about turning down a White House assignment because a white man said something racist. You could be working at McDonald's doing chicken nuggets, and your coworker who's cleaning the toilet will call you a nigger. I mean, you can go to Hardee's. I mean, come on. Come on. Neutralizing Workplace Racism, Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, every Thursday. Every Thursday. Retired firefighter on deck. Did you have commentary to share on Mr. Bolden's The Echo from Dealey Plaza?
Can I be heard, Gus?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I just wanted to report that I don't want to be along with Mr. Foreman because I'm on the Pell Mell Expressway right now. So I'm just going to take to just listening, and I'm probably not going to be able to be available to talk too much until next week. but I did have a lot to say. Just want to be safe driving.
Safety first. Safety first. Make intelligent choices. Love it. We'll make sure you're able to share next week for sure. Take notes so you don't forget what you were going to share with us from this time around. Let's see. Other folks who have commentary. Let's see. Henry in Chicago. Shamika Harris should be with us as well.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
All right. Lots of drinking at the White House for the White House detail. White people love to drink. Recommend that not for non-white people, as you say, Gus. Sobriety is the best. Apparently, Mr. Bolden, who was a Secret Service agent, actually needed protection. Apparently, it's during one of his details, he was harassed by a state trooper, and I'm assuming a white Secret Service agent had to come up and protect Mr. Bolden because of the fact that this white trooper wanted to do his daily duty of harassing a black man, even if he was part of the Secret Service. So I thought that was pretty ironic. Bolden took a huge risk staying at that cottage with a bunch of drunk white racist Secret Service agents who were armed. I don't recommend anybody, any non-white person, frolicking with drunk white men with guns. So that was a huge risk he took doing that. I don't know if he could have just said, I want to go get my own hotel or something like that, but obviously during that time, not a lot of hotels was accepting non-white black people. So maybe he might have had no choice, but that was a big risk. The conversation with Robert Kennedy was pretty interesting. He said he was making progress, telling Mr. Bolden they're making progress. I'm not sure what he means by that. What is progress? Having one black person in the Secret Service who had to get his job through white people. Not sure if that's progress. He said there were a few Negro agents in the FBI. Interesting he would say that, considering, like I said earlier, he had FBI surveillance put on Dr. King. He talked about getting trained, talking about training agents learning another language. One of the things I thought about was what was his plan. He was going to send, Bolden decided to learn another language. He was going to send him to an African country and take out somebody like Patrice Lumumba, soundtrack to a coup d'etat. So I thought that conversation was very interesting, and I think that's all the notes I had on you, my line.
They don't just know a language school; they know a language school in your specific hometown, as they say. Might have even thought about, they got plans. Woo! Man, white people are not ignorant about white supremacy, racism. Shamika Harris, did you have commentary?
Yes, sir, I do. First, I think I wanted to talk about something that was played in the audio segment after session 1. They were talking about the documents that were released about Kennedy. And they said the code names were in there, they were bad copies, that they couldn't be searched. And they also said it was a conversation between a CIA agent and a KGB agent. And the KGB agent said he watched Lee Harvey Oswald doing target practice with his rifle, and he wasn't very good at it. He was a lousy shot. That's interesting. And also when they were talking about those documents, they said there were some redactions. Now, My understanding is that these documents were released on Tuesday, and when they were released on Tuesday by the National Archives, they were not redacted because Trump said he wanted all the documents released without the redactions. And when that happened, they weren't redacted. They had lots of personal information on their people's birth dates, birthplaces, social security numbers, jobs, names, and many of the people who this personal information was released, these powerful white people are still alive. I mean, I think they released something like 400 social security numbers, which is absurd. And they knew that this information was in there. They just released it because Trump said so. Let me see. The second, they get on the plane. Pretty soon, a stewardess came walking down the aisle, passing out liquor in those little airplane bottles free of charge to anyone who wanted it. Soft drinks were also available. I asked for soda. The rules forbidding agents from drinking on duty were as clear as they could be. I think it is constructive that he did not drink when these other white people started drinking. White people can break the rules. The rules are for us. We'll get in trouble. They landed at Otis Air Force Base. He said the mood was light and friendly. Kennedy was clearly happy to be back in Massachusetts on this hot summer day. Suddenly, I felt a tug on my coat sleeve. I turned quickly to discover that my arm was in the grasp of one of those uniformed state troopers. "Let me see some ID," he demanded. He points to the Secret Service identification pin on his lapel, and he tries to keep moving to maintain his position in the line of protection as the president moved along in front of the crowd. But this race soldier, however, didn't let go. And, you know, the previous caller, he said it, he's like, man, he's supposed to be the Secret Service protecting the president, but he needed protection from a white person because this, you know, state trooper race soldier is harassing him. They get in the station wagon, smells like alcohol, agents are slurring their speech, showing other effects of their in-flight drinking, and he said at least 3 of them were clearly in no condition to respond properly to any emergency that might develop. See, that's a situation right there where you can tell they're not taking the protection of JFK seriously. They're in the car, and one of the agents in the car, Bob Foster, points out the window and shouts in his thick Southern accent, "There goes a nigger," and then reaches up and cups his mouth, his hand in front of his mouth as if he's trying to catch the words he had just spoken. Oops, with an exclamation mark. See, white people, you know, acting like things are funny, they're just being racist. And then someone says, one of the guys, when they're all sitting around, I'm sorry, I'm not going to skip. He says at 8 p.m., this is when they get to the cottage, right? And I think this was Henry who said, you know, it was kind of dangerous for him to be in there with all the drunk agents with the guns. I'm not sure he actually had a choice. I mean, this is his job. They really only had one place to stay, you know, in close proximity to the president. But at 8 p.m., I overheard Henderson asking agents, not including me, if they wanted to go into town. He drove off with a couple of other men. In addition to the drinking, the White House detail also had a reputation for womanizing. Stories circulated throughout the service about arrogant agents in Washington who fancied themselves playboys, and sure enough, I was awakened about 2 a.m. by the sounds of women's voices. I'm sure they wouldn't have took him to go find some white women to hang out with and engage in sexual activity. That would be a no-no. When Jackie Kennedy, you know, she asked him to watch Caroline for a little bit while she goes and gets in the water. And, you know, little girl asks him his name. You know, he tells her and everything. And he tells Caroline that he had a little girl about the same age as she was. And, you know, her name. And Caroline says, "Can she come and play with me?" He explains she's far away in Chicago. And Caroline, a child, I'm not sure how old she was at this point, but she said, I can go to Chicago, Caroline offered. And the thing is, that little girl actually could go to Chicago, and she knew it. I mean, yeah, obviously she would need some assistance. Somebody would have to go with her. But there are a lot of older non-white people who know it would be difficult to get from, say, Massachusetts to Chicago. But this little white girl understands that she has the power to go wherever she wants to go. And the scene, it just made me think about the power differential between a white child and an older non-white black person. And, you know, a lot of times non-white people, period, you know, we'll call ourselves men and women, but a scene like that really, hey, it makes it plain who has power and who does not. Let me see. When Bobby Kennedy asked him about going to the FBI, and he says, you know, he thought that he needed a law or an accounting degree, Bobby says things like that can always be waived. Yeah, things like that can always be waived if you're a white person, and they can be waived for black people when a white person says so. But that's just how white people think about the so-called rules. Rules are for us, not white people. And, you know, that's one of those things I think we really should understand. And then he said, I'm not sure what year this was, but he said, the president said, I'll be around for 7 or 8 more years. You should enroll in a school of languages. And I'm like, I just don't think he's going to be around for 7 or 8 more years. Yeah. And Harvey, the white man, you know, they're sitting around at the cottage. Agents are breaking out the drinks. Henderson sat on the living room couch, opened a beer, leveled a cold, hard stare at me, which I did my best to ignore. He kept it up through 2 or 3 quick beers until he suddenly spoke. Bolden. Yeah, Harvey, I'm going to tell you something, and I don't want you ever to forget it. The sound of the South was heavy in his voice. You're a nigger. You were born a nigger, and when you die, you'll still be a nigger. You will always be nothing but a nigger, so act like one! ! Henderson spaced out the words, slowly for emphasis, but his voice was rising. Yes, that's interesting. You know, we probably should write that down, remember it. Yeah. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Much obliged. Shamika Harris. Other folks, if you have commentary, saw other hands. *61 if you have thoughts you would like to share on our debut installment on the Echo from Dealey Plaza. Abraham Bolden. We just read The Heart of a Woman. Boys, gals. White child, probably safer than the black dude. In fact, she keeping him safe. Race soldier come out there and see him with that white child, she could step into the, hey, this nigger is all right. He's keeping us. I'm going to go to Chicago and see some of his nigger friends and everything. He's cool. Like, oh, okay. System of White Supremacy racism. That almost had kind of a Shirley Temple feel to it, that whole little scene there. Anyway, Chapter 5. Shirley Temple's dated, and all of what we're reading is dated too. So, Chapter 5. Kennedy needed to rest his back for a few days, having aggravated a lingering problem. Dr. Janet Travell, the president's personal physician, died in 1997 due to Kennedy's war injuries relating to his back. He underwent back surgery in the 1950s at the insistence of his powerful father, who pressured the surgeon. This only made it worse. Dr. Travell became his personal physician due to her expertise in treating back conditions. President Kennedy also had a number of other serious maladies during his political career, which only became known to the public long after his death. 2. Within the service, the drinking and carousing on the part of the White House detail was nearly legendary. Secret Service agent fired for allegedly talking to girlfriend in Obama's highway mansion for sexual encounter. Ansel Panda International Business Times. White House security breach left Obama's angry at Secret Service. New York Times. Oh my God. U.S. Secret Service Cartagena scandal involved 20 women. Number 3. Suddenly one of the agents in the car, Bob Foster, pointed out the window and shouted in his thick Southern accent, "There goes a nigger." Reminds me of Mr. Fuller's comment about racists seeing a monkey driving a car when they see us. That is about the size of it. And I, one, do not think that was a, whoops, I forgot there's a nigger here, and I'm very sure he probably said nigger and not nigger. If it was thar, oh yeah, it was nigger. Let's see. 4. When I answered that I had indeed thought about the FBI, but felt I couldn't qualify without a law degree or accounting, things like that can be waived. The power of those classified as white, and they do it so casually because they do it all the time for other white people. And then certainly we could do it for a non-white person, but you got to have a white hookup. Let's see. 5. I sensed that the president's first considerations would always involve mercy or compromise, whereas Bobby's instincts were to achieve total victory. The author, victim, seems to think he has a lot of insight into the thoughts and feelings of these two suspected racists, even though he has already seemingly very brief conversations with them. Interesting. I would agree, especially, yeah, I would agree. 6, you're a nigger, born a nigger, and when you die, you'll still be a nigger. Thanks. Don't pay attention to him, Abe. Tucker told me he gets like that when he's drinking. Thanks. Now that you explained it, it's the alcohol that makes him a racist. Got it. Indeed. Incidentally, I will say for a scene like this, everything Shamika Harris told us, the rules do not apply to white people. It's the same in terms of system of white supremacy, so they can break all these rules and drink and pass out on the job and all the rest of it, go get prostitutes and whatever else. You cannot do that and think you're going to keep your job. And now imagine if he had been liquored up and this played out. You're nigger, you're born nigger, you die nigger, you're nothing but a nigger, and you should be proud of being a nigger. If he'd been, I done had about 15 tequilas, what you call me? He had water. And he said soda. Teetotaling. Stay calm. Love you too. Now, reals. Stay a nigger. Oh, and that same thing I said before. I'd have whipped out my pad. Born a nigger. Die a nigger. A nigger when you die. Still be a nigger. Nothing but a nigger. All right, write all that down. Okay. Make sure I verify I got all that. Okay. Now, look here. What do I need to do to stay a nigger? And I'm going to write that down like slow. Is there anything I need to stop doing so that I can stay a nigger? I'll write that down. And then I'll leave. I think that's smart too, because I would not want to be in that sort of environment. You got all these intoxicated, armed white killers. I'm the only nigga. Matter of fact, we got rules about that too. It was Henry in Chicago. He said, hey, you go to the party and you are the only black face that run. Especially if you know, wait a minute, I'm the only nigger here and they all got guns. That's not the sound of the pistol fire, and that should be the sound of left, right, left, right, left, right. Your Nikes, your Timberlands are in the wind. I'm getting the Uber as I'm hoofing it. Let's see. But I would have asked that before I bolted. Like, what exactly do I need to do to stay a nigger? Break it down for me. Okay. And then I would share that list along with the racist jokes the next time on neutralizing workplace racism. Let's see. Notes from this portion of the text. So we just read chapter 5. That was it. That was a little bit lengthier of a chapter. This is so much better than what we read from Maya Angelou. Like, ooh, that book was awful. Just awful. Ooh. Let's see. Chapter 5. And in fact, isn't that 2 books in a row? I can say Saturday night. Not I'm Black and I'm Dangerous. I can say I'm gonna get me some stuff tonight, because we did hear a whole lot of drinking. I did not hear Mad Dog 2020, but man, we did get 2 in a row. Sobriety would be really 3 in a row, because there was a lot of drinking in Heart of a Woman and Song Flung Up to Heaven. So 3 in a row of wacky sauce and spirits and all the rest of it. Let's see. I would say if you're going to be flying with your coworkers, you want to be sober. That's a contained environment, and they have air rage and such anyway. You do not want to be liquored up on the plane with your coworkers. Let's see. We already talked about the trooper stopping him. There goes a Nigra. Again, keeping your composure. We talk about that on neutralizing workplace racism all the time. This is another, I just document, nothing to be upset about, especially this time period. Like, oh my goodness, like Negras, the way they say D-E-I now, and woke was Negra at that time. So you just write that down and keep moving. Let's see. All this drink, I'm going to get me some stuff tonight. 2 in a row. 3 in a row, sorry. Let's see. I would not do, we talk about all that sexual activity, just talked about that yesterday, and indeed, ain't no way in the world, Abe, you're coming with us, we're going to hook you up with some white women. I wouldn't care if we got the worst, whatever, prostitutes that just got released from prison. If they're white, like, oh, no, you can be staying in the hotel, bud. Beat it. I was going to make a point of him being named after Abraham Lincoln, but then it came up organically in the text. So, and with this Shirley Temple white child, Jackie Kennedy, Carolyn Kennedy, no less. But yeah, something about that bothers me. I don't know. LaRon Bennett forced into glory. There we go. You can go in. Matter of fact, they talked about all the racist. Abe Lincoln loved a racist funny. Whole section of the book on that, and we talked about that in the Souls of White Jokes. Abraham Lincoln specifically. Let's see. I was thinking the same thing. Why do you want me to join the FBI so that I can be used like William O'Neill to poison Fred Hampton in Chicago? Mark Clark, Fred Hampton in Chicago? Is that why you want me to learn all these languages and then ship me off to the continent? Get Patrice Lumumba or whatever else? Is that why you want me to do all this? You already picked out the language school and everything. Robert Kennedy, as Henry in Chicago pointed out twice, John Kennedy signed off on all that COINTELPRO and eavesdropping on Dr. King and all of that, called SNCC, sons of bitches, and all of that. That's why, that's also was coming to mind is, I bet Mr. Bolden, or I don't know, he was Secret Service, but did he know about COINTELPRO? I might even ask that now. Does he know about, at 90 years old, does he know about COINTELPRO and the Kennedys? Do you think he read Kenneth O'Reilly's Racial Matters? You think Mr. Bolden has a COINTELPRO file? Let's see. Oh, we already got that. Don't you forget it. He talks about Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson, one, they call him the Jackie Robinson of Secret Service. That's another tacky metaphor. I did a whole YouTube video about this. White people still use this metaphor today, which shows you the enduring dedication that white people have to white supremacy, racism, that 60 years later, there are still Negro firsts in anything. It's a whole new millennium, and wow, we got the first Jackie Robinson. And Jackie Robinson could have been killed. Now, I don't know what all else he's going to tell us. He said he had that premonition. He's not going to live to 30. I guess that didn't happen because he's still with us now, 2025, Mr. Bolden. But Jackie Robinson could have been killed at any time, on the field or off, Some of this is portrayed. The late Chadwick Boseman told us, but he could have been killed. I haven't heard anything thus far. Now, he's been called a nigger and all the rest of it. That's terrible. I haven't heard nothing so far where he could have been killed and it would have just been ho-hum, whatever. Jackie Robinson, easily, just like Kennedy, in some sense, he could have been killed in broad daylight and nothing would have been done about it. I'm talking about Jackie Robinson. Easily. Beaten, stabbed, or he could have been killed. Particularly in the 21st century, but even like I said, what I've heard now, I haven't heard any evidence like Mr. Bolden, he was about to be killed, could have been killed, and nothing would have been done about it. Like, even if they'd killed him in this fight, like, I don't think that would have just been, whoa, we killed a nigger. We're like, whoa, wait a minute now. The first CIA or Secret Service, like, I don't think so. I am very sure, and I have heard many other white and non-white, Jackie Robinson could have been killed. Slow all that comparing down, and no, you're not. There's one Jack Robinson who died very young and with a lot of gray hair because he knew he could have easily been killed at any moment. And, and he told that nigger not to pick up a stick and wave it at a white man. UCLA legend Jack Robinson and World War II veteran Jack Robinson, who also wrote an autobiography. Let's see. That'll be enough for one day. Got it. Let's see. And I would have definitely, when he gets to the end and he says that Kennedy puts him on the plane and maybe wants him to be in the White House, and the way that Harvey talked to him, that's going, or Henderson, that is going to detract him, or his name is Harvey Henderson, that's going to detract him from taking this position. I do not, because I mean, I don't know where you're going to go, especially at this time period. The racism has been everywhere. He talks about, man, I wish we had got the one when he went to give the driver a ticket. Said, I don't take no ticket from no nigger. Remember, they had laws where if you're a black officer, you could not arrest a white person. That was law in many jurisdictions across the U.S., maybe the world. You can go and lock up Leroy Devontae if you want to, but don't you dare think, I don't care if this white man is out here robbed a bank, killed a white man, kidnapped a child, whatever. Get on your radio and get a white man to go arrest him. So that's why I'm saying I would have taken the White House detail. I mean, oh my goodness. All the things that you can overhear and eavesdrop, learn about racism, put that on your resume. Kennedy's trying to hook you up. Hey, just ride that till the wheels come off. See how much he can hook you up with. Could have hung out, met Mr. Fuller in D.C., ride that. It can't just be it was a racist white man, so I'm not going to do it, because it's going to be a racist white man, a racist white woman everywhere you go. We say that every week. Neutralizing workplace racism, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Miss Scarborough say the Central, 7 p.m. Central. But I say that all the time. You can't just say, well, it's a racist white man here, so I'm going to go to job B. There are racist white people at every plantation, and probably some non-white people who don't like black people. We heard that here too. Like, I'm Puerto Rican. Get away from me, Leroy. I'm not black. Black it back. I'm brown. I stick around. I'm brown. Stick around. I wonder if Dr. Welsing read this book. Seems like she would have enjoyed this too. The Chicago Connect and all, right? Any hoodles. Next week, just got started. This book is not that long, so we will not be on it like forever. It is not super long, maybe I think 5 sessions, and we should be done. We will pick up next week, chapter 6. We'll be here tomorrow, compensatory call-in, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Saturday night, Black and I'm Dangerous. For this book and the last 3 books in total that we have read, sobriety would be best. Finally, we got a black person with some black self-respect and sense on the plantation. Maybe I don't need no Mad Dog 2020. Imagine that. No name calling black people. Given everything that we heard this week, this is exactly why race soldiers are the master name callers. We do not want to be name calling any black people. Let white people do all of the name calling. No gossiping. Seems like there's been a lot of that too. You know, they were talking about this Bolden nigger every day. They, what? They let this Bolden nigger on the deep. Oh my God, we can't even go get hookers the way we want. Oh God, the Bolden nigger. No gossiping. No throwaway offspring. All of the sacrifice that his parents made, and his privileged black male can't even get the big piece of it. He didn't even get a chicken wing, man. Starved to take care of these children and all the rest of it. Like, man, no throwaway offspring and no lip, because he produced those children. Dad didn't sit with these Trump snatchers and took all my food, can't even get a chicken wing in my own house and work 15 jobs. Nobody told you to have 6 children. Zip it. Think savory thoughts or fewer children. Privileged black male. Hush all that up. No throwaway offspring. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. No problem. You're a victim.
Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.